Hey there, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I've put together a new collection of interesting stories. So whether you're here to relax, fall asleep, or just listen in the background, this should be a good one. All of the stories in this video were carefully selected and arranged to create a smooth, easy listening experience without anything too jarring or distracting. You can check out the timestamps in the description to navigate between stories as well. Feel free to let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always interesting to see where everyone is tuning in from. All right, get comfortable, and let's start with the first story. It's about a husband who gets pushed out of his own company after his wife believes the wrong person, and things escalate pretty quickly from there.
Story 1. My wife threw me out of the companies after believing her new intern's lies. 3 weeks later, she asked if I'd reflected. Instead, I handed her divorce and resignation papers. She lost it. You know that gut feeling when something feels off at work? Like when everyone suddenly stops talking the moment you enter the room and suddenly they're all very interested in their computer screens like they're watching the season finale of their favorite show. Yeah, that was my Monday morning. And let me tell you, it wasn't because someone finally figured out who kept stealing lunches from the breakroom fridge. I walked into the office at exactly 8:15, same as I had for the past 6 years, carrying my usual overpriced coffee that I pretended was worth $7, and the entire floor went silent. Not the comfortable kind of silent where people are focused on work, but that awkward suffocating silence you get at a funeral when someone's phone goes off playing. Who let the dogs out? Sandra from accounting literally minimized her screen so fast I'm pretty sure she broke a finger. Mike from sales suddenly found his stapler absolutely fascinating, turning it over in his hands like it was an ancient artifact he'd just discovered. Even Barry, the guy who never shuts up about his fantasy football league, looked at me and then immediately pretended to take an urgent phone call from absolutely nobody. Something was definitely up. And spoiler alert, it wasn't good news about the annual bonus structure. I made it to my desk, which sat in that weird middle zone between the executives and the regular employees, a physical representation of my entire existence at this company. See, here's the thing about working at a company your wife owns. You're never quite management, but you're definitely not one of the guys either. You're like Schrodinger's employee, simultaneously privileged and screwed, existing in a quantum state of workplace awkwardness that would make HR textbooks weep. My wife, Clarice, had started this consulting firm 7 years ago with my help, my money, and my countless sleepless nights convincing her she could do it. Back then, she was all nervous energy and big dreams. And I was the idiot who thought mixing business with marriage was a sustainable life choice, right up there with buying lottery tickets for retirement planning and thinking you can change someone. Fast forward to now and she's the CEO who wears power suits that cost more than my first car while I'm the director of operations, which is corporate speak for does everything important but gets none of the credit. It's like being the guy who writes all the hit songs but the pretty face gets to perform them on stage. Actually, scratch that. At least those guys get royalties. I barely sat down when my desk phone rang. Internal line extension 0001. That was Clarice's office. And when your wife, who's also your boss, calls you at 8:17 in the morning, you're either getting promoted or about to have the worst day of your professional life. Given the vibe in the office, I wasn't exactly expecting a raise. Logan conference room. Now, her voice had that CEO tone, the one she used with vendors who missed deadlines and employees she was about to fire. The fact that she was using it on me, her husband of 8 years, should have been my first clue to just walk out right then and start my new life as a surf instructor in Costa Rica. But no, I'm a glutton for punishment. So, I walked to the conference room like a man heading to the gallows, except the gallows was made of tempered glass and had a smartboard nobody knew how to use properly. I opened the door and there they were, the entire HR team looking like they were auditioning for a courtroom drama on basic cable. Janet from HR had her "I'm so sorry this is happening" face on, which is basically her resting face, but with more sympathy eyebrows. Marcus, her supervisor, was doing that thing where he shuffles papers to look busy and important. And sitting at the head of the table like she was about to launch a hostile takeover of my dignity was Clarice, my wife, looking at me with the warmth of a tax audit. But the real kicker, sitting right beside her, looking like he'd just won Employee of the Month at the Gap, was Jasper, the intern. The 22-year-old kid who'd been with us for exactly 6 weeks and still asked where the bathroom was twice a day. The guy who thought Synergy was the name of a wellness supplement and probably believed Excel was an energy drink you bought at gas stations. That Jasper Logan, Clarice said, folding her hands on the table in that way that meant business. Bad business. We've received serious allegations regarding your conduct. I blinked. Conduct? The most scandalous thing I'd done lately was microwave fish in the break room. And even then, I'd apologize profusely and open all the windows. What conduct could they possibly be talking about? Jasper cleared his throat, and I swear to God, he had the audacity to look wounded like a puppy that had been kicked. If that puppy was a manipulative little weasel who couldn't write a proper email to save his life. Mr. Harrison, Janet began using my last name like we hadn't shared 7 Christmas parties together. Jasper has reported that you've been deliberately sabotaging his projects and undermining his work because you feel threatened by his talent and fresh perspectives. I'm sorry. What? Threatened by Jasper? The kid who asked me last week if PDFs were like a Microsoft thing and once scheduled a meeting for 30 a.m. because he didn't understand military time. That Jasper. I'd spent the last 6 weeks fixing his mistakes, teaching him basic professional skills, and preventing him from accidentally insulting clients with his overly casual emails that read like text messages to his frat brothers. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The absurdity of the situation hit me like a freight train made of irony and stupidity, and I just laughed. A genuine belly laugh that echoed through the conference room. Bad move. Terrible move, actually. Career-ending move, as it turned out. Clarice's eyes went glacial, colder than the Ice Queen in every Disney movie combined. Her jaw tightened, and I could see the executive decision being made in real time behind those eyes I used to find beautiful. This is exactly the dismissive attitude Jasper described, she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through steel. Pack your things. You're terminated. Effective immediately. The room went silent. Janet looked uncomfortable. Marcus pretended to write something important. Jasper had the decency to look down at his phone, probably already drafting his promotion announcement. You're firing me? I asked, the laugh dying in my throat. Clarice, I co-built this company. I've been here since day 1. Before day 1, actually, I was here on day 30 when we were designing business cards in our apartment. That's irrelevant, she said, standing up, smoothing her skirt like she was brushing away our entire history. Your behavior is detrimental to team morale and company culture. Security will escort you out. And just like that, my wife fired me from our company. The one I'd helped build from nothing. The one I'd invested my savings into. The one I'd sacrificed weekends and anniversaries and normal couple time for. All because some 22-year-old TikTok philosopher decided to play victim and she believed him over me, her husband. I walked out with my box of belongings, my stupid mug that said world's okayest employee that Rico had given me as a joke, my stapler that I bought myself because the company ones were garbage, a framed photo of us from happier times that now felt like evidence from a crime scene, and my dignity hanging by a thread thinner than Jasper's resume. As I passed my former coworkers, now actively avoiding eye contact like I had some contagious disease, I thought to myself, this is going to make a great TED Talk someday. How I lost everything before breakfast. A modern love story. The security guard, Dave, who I'd shared countless conversations with about his daughter's soccer games, walked me to the parking lot without saying a word. Even he couldn't look at me. I loaded my box into my car, a car that still had 2 years of payments left on it. Sat in the driver's seat and stared at the building I'd just been escorted out of like a criminal. This was going to be a hell of a story to tell at parties, assuming I ever got invited to parties again. The first week after getting fired by your wife is brutal in ways that self-help books don't prepare you for. It's not just the professional humiliation or the financial panic, though those are definitely part of the fun package. It's the weird hollow feeling you get when you wake up and realize you have absolutely nowhere to be. No one expecting you and no purpose beyond figuring out what the hell just happened to your life. I crashed at my buddy Rico's apartment in Brooklyn, a third-floor walk-up that smelled like a combination of old takeout, regret, and whatever legal herb Rico was into these days. Rico's a freelance DJ who hasn't filed taxes since the Obama era, the first term, and lives his life by the philosophy that receipts are just suggestions and the IRS is more of a guideline than an actual rule. His apartment reflected this worldview. Organized chaos mixed with the distinct impression that an adult man had given up on adulting somewhere around 2016. The couch I was sleeping on was one of those leather numbers that looked expensive in the store, but had been beaten into submission by years of abuse, late-night gaming sessions, and what I'm pretty sure were stains from every food group known to mankind. It smelled like regret and old pizza. Specifically that pizza you order at 2 a.m. when you're drunk and think extra garlic knots are a good life choice. But hey, beggars can't be choosers when it comes to upholstery. And I was definitely in beggar territory. Rico was cool about the whole situation, which is to say he didn't ask too many questions and kept his liquor cabinet well stocked. Mikasa s sukasa, bro. He'd said when I showed up at his door at 9 p.m. on a Monday with my pathetic box of office supplies and a face that screamed, my life is a dumpster fire. He'd taken one look at me, grabbed the box, and pointed to the couch. The remote's somewhere under the cushions. There's beer in the fridge that's probably still good. And we don't talk about feelings until at least Wednesday. House rules. Every night that first week, I replayed the boardroom scene in my head like some kind of masochistic film critic watching the worst movie of my life on repeat. Clarice's cold eyes, Jasper's fake wounded expression, Janet from HR, and her sympathy eyebrows. The way Clarice had said effective immediately, like she was ordering lunch instead of ending my career and our marriage in one efficient corporate power move. The betrayal wasn't just professional, though. Getting fired sucked in its own special way. It was personal. Deeply personal. The kind of personal that makes you question every decision you've made since puberty. I'd helped build Clarice's empire from nothing. Those late nights when she was freaking out about losing our first client, and I talked her off the ledge with cheap wine and cheaper words of encouragement. The endless budget meetings where I crunched numbers until my eyes bled because she wasn't a numbers person. The emotional pep talks when she doubted herself, when she wanted to quit, when she thought maybe she wasn't cut out for running a business. I'd been her biggest cheerleader, her unpaid therapist, her business partner, and her husband. And one clueless intern with delusions of competence had taken it all away with a few well-placed lies. Meanwhile, Jasper was probably updating his LinkedIn profile right that very second. Successfully restructured upper management and improved workplace culture through effective communication and leadership. The kid was 22 and had the self-awareness of a golden retriever at a tennis ball factory. But sure, he was a leadership expert now. I bet he even added conflict resolution to his skills section right next to proficient in Microsoft Word and can use a stapler. By Wednesday, I'd made the mistake of scrolling through social media, which is universally recognized as a terrible idea when you're already feeling like garbage. But I did it anyway because apparently I hate myself. Instagram was a nightmare parade of my former life. There was Clarice at some charity gala wearing a dress that cost more than Rico's monthly rent, smiling that winning smile she reserved for clients and cameras. And right there beside her, looking like he'd just won prom king, was Jasper in a suit that probably came from his dad's closet. The caption read, "Great talent deserves recognition. So proud of our team's innovation and fresh perspectives. #leadership #innovation #futurofiness. Great talent, fresh perspectives." I wanted to throw my phone across Rico's apartment, but it was the only thing I owned that still worked, so I restrained myself. Sure, Clarice recognition. I hoped his talent came with a warranty and a 30-day return policy because that kid was going to crash and burn harder than the Hindenburg, and I was petty enough to want a front row seat. The comments were even worse. Colleagues I'd worked with for years, people I'd helped, people who owed their jobs to projects I'd managed, all leaving heart emojis and congratulatory messages like Jasper had just discovered fire. So inspiring. Love this energy. The future is bright. I wondered if any of them remembered who'd actually built the foundation they were all standing on, or if I'd just been erased from company history like some Soviet-era photograph. Rico found me that night spiraling into an Instagram-induced depression hole eating ramen straight from the pot because I couldn't be bothered to find a bowl. "Dude," he said, taking the pot from my hands. "You got to stop this. She fired you. She's a jerk. He's a bigger jerk. Life goes on. Also, this is my good pot and you're getting MSG all over my couch." "Sorry," I muttered, wiping my mouth with my sleeve like the classy guy I'd become. "Look, man," Rico said, sitting down next to me with the beer he'd apparently decided I needed. "I've known you since college. You're smart. You're capable. And you built that company as much as she did, maybe more. So, she believes some kid over you. That's her loss, her mistake, her karma coming back to bite her in the designer ass. You're going to be fine." When I asked, taking the beer because Rico was right about one thing. I definitely needed it. "I don't know eventually." Rico shrugged. "I'm a DJ, not a life coach. But I do know that sitting here eating sad noodles and stalking your ex-wife's Instagram isn't going to help. You need a plan, bro. A revenge plan, a comeback plan, something. Otherwise, you're just going to be that guy who sleeps on my couch forever. And honestly, my couch has seen better days." He was right. Annoyingly right in the way that friends who've known you too long tend to be. By Friday, something shifted. Maybe it was hitting rock bottom. Or maybe it was the fact that Rico's couch was literally developing a Logan-shaped dent. But I stopped the pity eating noodles routine and started thinking clearly for the first time since Monday. If Clarice wanted reflection, if she wanted me to sit and think about what I'd done wrong, she was about to get her wish. I was going to reflect all right. I was going to reflect so hard she'd see her own reflection burning in those clean glass walls of the company she'd thrown me out of. I was going to reflect until reflection became action, and action became the kind of revenge that served cold with legal documentation. I pulled out my laptop, the one personal item that wasn't company property, and started making lists, files. I had access to documents I'd saved, emails that proved my involvement in building the company, contracts with my signature, investment records, everything. Rico walked by with his third coffee of the evening, getting ready for his midnight DJ gig at some club in Manhattan. "That's more like it," he said, seeing me actually doing something besides wallowing. "Welcome back to the land of the living, buddy. Now figure out how to make them pay and maybe find your own place because I'm pretty sure my couch is filing a restraining order." I smiled for the first time in days. "Thanks, Rico, for everything." Yeah. Don't get all emotional on me. Just promise me one thing." "What?" "When you take her down, let me DJ the celebration party. I'm thinking something with a good beat drop right when she realizes she's screwed." "Deal," I said and got back to work. Revenge, I was learning, requires planning, patience, and a really good internet connection. Fortunately, Rico had 2 out of 3, and the bodega down the street had decent Wi-Fi if you sat near the window. Week 2 of unemployment hit different, as the kids say, though I'm pretty sure they don't mean it in the context of existential career crises and marital implosions. The self-pity phase had officially ended somewhere around day 9 when I realized that feeling sorry for myself wasn't paying Rico's Wi-Fi bill or getting me any closer to making Clarice regret every decision she'd made since hiring Jasper the Wonder. I turned corporate depression into strategy, which sounds way more badass than it actually was. In reality, it meant I showered regularly again, stopped eating cereal for dinner, and converted Rico's coffee table into a makeshift war room that would make conspiracy theorists jealous. No more tears, no pathetic begging, no drunk texting my wife asking her to reconsider. Just cold, calculated spreadsheets of vengeance. If there's one thing my years in corporate America taught me, it's that revenge is best served with proper documentation and color-coded Excel tabs. I spent hours digging through my old files, the ones I'd backed up to my personal cloud storage because I'm paranoid about losing work, which turned out to be the smartest paranoia I'd ever had. Ownership documents, email receipts, project proposals, client contracts, budget projections, meeting notes, literally everything from the past 7 years. My fingerprints were everywhere in that company. From the first logo design we'd sketched on a napkin at a diner in Queens to the pitch deck that landed our first $1 million client. I'd been there for every pivot, every crisis, every late-night brainstorming session that saved the company from going under. The more I dug, the angrier I got. But it was a productive anger, the kind that fuels marathons and motivates people to climb mountains or write strongly worded Yelp reviews. Every document I found was another piece of evidence that I wasn't just some employee Clarice could casually dismiss. I was a co-founder in everything but official title. And that oversight on her part was about to become very, very expensive for her. Rico would come home from his gigs at 3 o'clock in the morning to find me still awake, surrounded by printed documents and laptop screens, pacing back and forth across his small living room like a caged tiger with spreadsheet access. "Dude," he said one night, setting down his DJ equipment and staring at me with a mixture of concern and amusement. "You look like a divorced James Bond, except instead of martinis and car chases, you've got Excel and highlighted contracts. It's weirdly intense." "Correction," I said, holding up a particularly damning email thread where Clarice explicitly acknowledged my 50% contribution to a major project. "I'm a patient James Bond with evidence. Bond got revenge with gadgets and explosions. I'm getting mine with documentation and contract law. Much more civilized." "That's the nerdiest thing you've ever said. And I once heard you explain cryptocurrency for 45 minutes, Rico replied, grabbing a beer from his fridge. "But I respect it. You're like if John Wick was an accountant. Very specific set of skills, very boring to watch, but somehow still intimidating." He wasn't wrong. I'd become obsessed with building an airtight case, not just for my own satisfaction, but because I knew Clarice. She was smart, ruthless when it came to business and had probably already consulted with her own lawyers about protecting herself from any blowback. If I was going to come at her, I needed to come correct, as the saying goes, with every receipt and every piece of evidence documented, cross-referenced, and ready to present to someone who could actually do something with it. That's when I remembered Amamira. Amamira Hassan was a lawyer friend from my college days back when we were both young and stupid and thought we could change the world with good intentions and student loan debt. She'd gone to law school while I'd stumbled into the corporate consulting world, but we'd stayed in touch over the years through occasional happy hours and the kind of friendship that survives on memes and birthday texts. More importantly, she specialized in employment law and business disputes and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in depositions. She once made a CEO cry during a settlement negotiation, and rumor had it she'd framed the tissue he used as a trophy in her office. I called her on a Tuesday afternoon, mentally preparing my pitch. Amamira was successful, busy, and probably had better things to do than help her old college buddy with his messy divorce/raffle termination situation. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. "Logan Harrison," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Either you're calling to finally take me up on that investment opportunity in my cousin's food truck, or something spectacularly bad has happened in your life. I'm guessing option B based on the fact that you're calling at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, which is when normal employed people are at work." "Your guess is correct," I said, diving right in. "My wife fired me from the company we built together because a 22-year-old intern accused me of sabotaging his projects, which is ridiculous because the kid can barely work the copy machine without creating an office hazard." There was a pause, then Amira burst out laughing. The kind of genuine, uncontrollable laughter that made me realize how absurd my situation actually sounded when said out loud. "I'm sorry," she managed between laughs. "I'm not laughing at your pain. I'm laughing at the sheer audacity of that scenario. Your wife, who is also your boss, fired you because of an intern. An intern? Does this intern have superpowers? A trust fund? Blackmail material? What am I missing here?" "Apparently, he has youth, enthusiasm, and fresh perspectives," I said, unable to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. "Also, he's probably sleeping with her, but I can't prove that yet. That's more of a gut feeling based on the way she defended him and the fact that he's suddenly appearing in all her social media posts like he's her new accessory." "Oh, honey," Amamira said, her lawyer voice kicking in. "You don't need to prove an affair for what I'm thinking. Your wife threw you out of a company you helped build because of some kid with delusions of competence. That's not just wrongful termination. That's a business dispute waiting to happen. Tell me you kept records. Please tell me you're not calling me empty-handed." "I have everything," I said, looking at my carefully organized piles of documents, emails, contracts, financial records, project files, client correspondence. "My fingerprints are on every major decision that company made for 7 years. I just need someone who can turn all this evidence into actual consequences." "Logan," Amamira said, and I could hear her settling into what I imagined was her lawyer chair, probably already pulling up a legal pad to take notes. "I'm going to ask you a very important question, and I need you to be honest with me. Are you looking for a settlement, or are you looking for blood?" I thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. Blood. Metaphorical legal blood. I want her to understand that throwing away 7 years of partnership over an intern's lies was the worst business decision she ever made. I want the company to know I wasn't just some employee. And I want Jasper to learn that actions have consequences, even if those consequences take a few weeks to arrive. "Perfect," Amamira said. And I could hear the excitement in her voice, the tone she probably used when she saw a particularly juicy case. "Because I've been dealing with insurance disputes for the past 3 months and I'm bored out of my mind. Your situation sounds messy, complicated, and exactly the kind of challenge I need. Let's turn you into the ghost that haunts their balance sheets. Let's make them wish they'd treated you better. Let's remind your ex-wife that hell hath no fury like a co-founder scorned." "You're mixing metaphors," I pointed out. "I'm a lawyer, not an English teacher," she shot back. "Now, scam me everything you have and let's start building a case that'll make them regret every smug LinkedIn post and every dismissive email. This is going to be fun." And that's exactly what we did. Over the next several days, Amamira and I worked like we were preparing for trial at The Hague instead of a business dispute in New York. She asked questions I hadn't thought of, found angles I'd missed, and turned my pile of evidence into a coherent narrative that painted a very clear picture. I wasn't just an employee. I was a founding partner who'd been illegally forced out. Rico watched our video calls with fascination. "It's like watching a heist movie, except instead of stealing diamonds, you're stealing justice, which is way less exciting, but probably more legal." "Definitely more legal." I agreed, highlighting another section of contract law that Amamira had sent me to review. For the first time since that awful Monday in the conference room, I felt something other than anger and betrayal. I felt hope, purpose, and the cold satisfaction of knowing that Clarice had made a massive mistake, and I had the receipts to prove it. 3 weeks after getting unceremoniously fired from my own company, my life had settled into a strange new rhythm that I can only describe as organized chaos with legal paperwork. I'd moved out of Rico's apartment after his couch officially filed for disability. Found a modest studio in Atoria that smelled like someone's grandmother's pop collection and spent my days working with Amamira to build a case so airtight it could survive in space. My nights were dedicated to not checking Clarice's social media, a battle I lost roughly 70% of the time because I'm only human and humans are fundamentally stupid creatures who enjoy emotional self-harm. It was a Thursday morning around 10 a.m. and I was sitting at my new IKEA desk that I'd assembled wrong twice before finally getting it right, reviewing some contract amendments Amamira had sent over when my doorbell rang. Now, I wasn't expecting anyone. The only people who knew my new address were Rico, Amamira, and the very judgmental landlord who'd made it clear she didn't appreciate young people and their loud music. Even though the loudest thing I played was a podcast about financial planning. So, when that doorbell chimed, my first thought was that it was probably a delivery guy with a package for the wrong apartment, which happened approximately 3 times a week in this building. I opened the door in my sweatpants and a college t-shirt that had seen better decades, looking exactly like what I was, a recently unemployed man whose fashion sense had died along with his marriage. And there she was, standing in my hallway like she'd materialized from my worst nightmare or best revenge fantasy, depending on how you looked at it. Clarice, my wife, my ex-boss, my soon-to-be ex-everything, standing there in designer gilt, and a Chanel pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She was holding a Starbucks cup in each hand, like peace offerings could come in many sizes with extra foam, and had that expression on her face that I'd seen her use with difficult clients. The one that said, "I'm being reasonable, and you should appreciate my reasonableness, Logan," she said, holding out one of the coffee cups like we were old friends meeting for a casual catch-up instead of estranged spouses in the middle of a corporate warfare situation. "I brought your usual caramel macchiato, extra shot, no whip. Can we talk?" I stared at her, then at the coffee, then back at her. The audacity of this woman showing up at my door with a $7 beverage after ruining my life was almost impressive in its sheer nerve. It was like she'd taken a master class in how to insult someone while pretending to be nice and graduated with honors. "How did you find my address?" I asked. Not taking the coffee because I wasn't about to be bribed with overpriced caffeine, no matter how accurately she'd remembered my order. "I have my ways," she said with a small smile that probably worked on clients, but made me want to shut the door in her face. "Can I come in? We should talk. You've had time to reflect on everything. And I think maybe we both overreacted. Adults should be able to discuss things rationally." Reflect. There was that word again. Like I'd been sent to my room to think about what I'd done wrong when the only thing I'd done wrong was marry someone who valued an intern's lies over her husband's integrity. I'd reflected all right. I'd reflected so hard I could start a meditation retreat for other wrongfully terminated spouses. I'd reflected myself right into a lawyer's office and a case strategy that would make her regret every decision she'd made since Jasper walked into our lives. But instead of saying all that, I smiled, a genuine smile that probably looked slightly unhinged given my current mental state, and said, "You know what? You're absolutely right. I have had time to reflect. Come in." I stepped aside and Clarice walked into my tiny studio apartment with the careful steps of someone entering foreign territory, taking in the second-hand furniture, the IKEA desk that was slightly crooked, the complete absence of the luxury she'd become accustomed to. I could see her mentally cataloging everything, probably thinking about how far I'd fallen, how this proved she'd made the right choice. The coffee cups were still in her hands, props in whatever performance she'd planned. "Nice place." She lied because Clarice was nothing if not professionally polite even when she was clearly thinking the opposite. "Cozy." Cozy is real estate code for smaller than a parking space. "But sure, let's go with that," I said, closing the door behind her. "You said you wanted to talk, so talk. Tell me why you're here, Clarice, because I know it's not just to deliver overpriced coffee and comment on my living situation." She set both cups down on my wobbly coffee table, another IKEA special that I definitely assembled wrong, and turned to face me with that CEO expression she wore in board meetings. "Logan, I think we both said things we didn't mean. The situation got out of hand. Maybe I was too hasty in my decision. You're talented. You know the company inside and out. And I think if we could just sit down and talk through what happened, maybe we could find a way forward for both of us." Translation: the company was probably struggling without me. Jasper had likely screwed something up spectacularly, and she needed me back, but didn't want to admit she'd made a catastrophic mistake. I could see it in her eyes, that desperation she was trying to hide behind corporate buzzwords and fake reconciliation coffee. "A way forward," I repeated, walking over to my desk and picking up a folder I prepared specifically for this moment because Amamira had predicted this would happen with about 90% certainty. "You mean like how we moved forward when you fired me in front of HR, or how we moved forward when you believed a 22-year-old over your husband? That kind of forward." "Logan, don't be difficult," she said, her voice taking on that edge that meant her patience was wearing thin. "I'm trying to fix this. To fix us. You've had 3 weeks to calm down and think rationally. Surely you can see that we're better together than apart. Both personally and professionally." "Oh, I've thought rationally," I said, opening the folder and pulling out the papers inside. I've thought very rationally, actually, more rationally than I have in years. And you're right. We should talk about moving forward. So, here. I handed her the folder, watching her face as she took it, probably expecting some kind of apology letter or list of conditions for my return. She opened it with that confident smile that was about to die a spectacular death, and I savored every second as her eyes scanned the first page. Divorce papers, professionally drafted, legally binding, waiting for signatures. Her smile faltered. She flipped to the second page, her face going from confused to pale as she realized what she was looking at. A formal resignation letter from any and all positions at her company, along with a notice of intent to pursue legal action regarding wrongful termination and ownership disputes. 2-for-1 deal, as they say at the discount stores Clarice would never shop at. You can't be serious, she said, looking up at me like I just told her the earth was flat and birds were government drones. Logan, this is ridiculous. You're throwing away our marriage, our business, everything we built together over one misunderstanding. One misunderstanding. I felt the anger rising, the kind I'd been keeping controlled for 3 weeks while building my case. Clarice, you fired me. You chose to believe Jasper, a kid who still lists Microsoft Word as a skill on his resume over me. Your husband, your actual business partner, the guy who was there when you were having panic attacks about losing clients. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was a choice. Your choice. And now I'm making mine. She was shaking her head, the papers trembling slightly in her hands. Logan, please don't do this. We can fix this. I can fix this. Just tell me what you want. Too late, I said, and meant it. You wanted me to reflect? I reflected right into a lawyer's office. Right into realizing that I deserve better than someone who throws me away the moment it's convenient. Sign the papers, Clarice. Or don't. Either way, I'm done. That's when it happened. The moment that made everything worth it. Her phone sitting in her designer purse on my coffee table, buzzed with a text notification. The screen lit up, visible to both of us. And there it was in all its glory. Did he sign it? Eyes Jasper. Her face went pale, ghost white. The kind of pale you see in horror movies right before someone realizes they're about to die. She grabbed her phone so fast she nearly knocked over the untouched coffee cups. But it was too late. I'd seen it. She knew I'd seen it. The whole carefully constructed facade of wanting to fix things and moving forward together crumbled like a sand castle hit by a tsunami. That's not, she started, but I held up my hand. Save it, I said, walking to the door and opening it. You and Jasper clearly had this whole thing planned. Come here. Play the regretful wife. Get me to sign whatever you needed signed. Probably some kind of settlement that screws me over while making you look generous. Am I close? She didn't answer. Just stood there clutching her phone like it was evidence at a crime scene, which legally speaking, it kind of was. Get out, Clarice. I said, no longer angry, just tired. Take your guilt coffee and your fake apologies and your intern boyfriend and get out of my apartment. My lawyer will be in touch. She walked past me and for just a second I almost felt bad. Almost. Then I remembered the conference room. The humiliation, the 3 weeks of sleeping on Rico's couch. And the feeling passed quicker than Jasper's competence in any given work situation. As she left, I closed the door and leaned against it, allowing myself one small smile of satisfaction. Round 1, Logan. Now, if you're expecting some dramatic movie scene where I stormed back into the office with a megaphone and a PowerPoint presentation titled Why Clarice is the Worst, a documentary, you'd be dead wrong. That's amateur hour. The kind of revenge that feels good for 30 seconds and then lands you with a restraining order and a reputation as that crazy ex-husband. No, I went full stealth mode. The kind of strategic, calculated approach that keeps lawyers employed and makes insurance companies nervous. While Clarice was presumably having her little meltdown about the divorce papers and the fact that her manipulation attempt had backfired more spectacularly than New Coke, I was busy with Amamira preparing a legal storm that Clarice wouldn't see coming until it was already raining subpoenas and court dates. See, the thing about revenge is that the best kind isn't loud or obvious. It's quiet, methodical, and backed up by so much documentation that it could fill a small library or at least crash a Google Drive account. Amamira had moved into full lawyer mode, which was both terrifying and impressive to witness. She'd transformed from my college buddy who once did karaoke to Britney Spears while drunk into a legal assassin who probably had a vision board somewhere labeled, "People I'm going to destroy in court this quarter." We met at her office in Midtown, a sleek space that screamed success and had coffee that was actually good, not the burnt disaster most offices try to pass off as beverages. Okay, Amamira said, spreading out documents across her massive glass desk like a general planning a military campaign. Here's what we've got. Your ex-wife, in her infinite wisdom and complete lack of legal foresight, quietly restructured the company about 8 months ago to make herself the sole decision maker and primary owner. Very subtle, very sneaky, very much the kind of thing people do when they're planning to screw someone over eventually. 8 months ago, I interrupted doing the math in my head. That was right around when Jasper started his internship. She was planning this. Either that or she just wanted more control. And your firing was opportunistic. Amamira shrugged, tapping her pen against a particularly damning contract. Either way, here's the beautiful part. She restructured on paper, filed some forms, probably paid some expensive consultant to make it all look legal and official. But, and this is a big but cannot emphasize this enough, your signature is still on several original contracts, partnership agreements, incorporation documents, intellectual property filings, the works, which means her sole ownership isn't so solo after all. It's like she tried to remove you from a group photo, but forgot you're also in the background of every other picture. I leaned forward trying to understand the legal implications while also enjoying the schadenfreude of knowing Clarice had screwed up. So what does that mean in normal person English? It means, Amamira said with a smile that would make sharks nervous, that she doesn't actually own the company outright. You have legal grounds to claim partial ownership, possibly up to 50% depending on how good the judge's mood is and how badly her lawyers fumble their arguments. She tried to erase you from the company history, but legally, you're still written into the foundation. You can't just white out someone from business contracts like they're a typo in a high school essay. That's the best news I've heard since the barista spelled my name right at Starbucks, I said, feeling actual hope for the first time in weeks. It gets better, Amamira continued, pulling up something on her laptop and turning it to face me. Remember how you said you helped secure most of the major clients? I've been going through the contracts you provided and your name appears on approximately 78% of all initial client agreements as the primary contact or negotiator. That's not just evidence of your involvement. That's proof that the company's success is directly tied to your work. Any judge with half a brain is going to see that you weren't just some employee she could fire on a whim. You were integral to the business operations. I sat back, letting it all sink in. 3 weeks ago, I'd been sitting on Rico's couch, eating sad noodles and questioning my entire existence. Now, I had a legal case that could potentially destroy everything Clarice had tried to build without me. It felt good, really good. The kind of good that probably makes therapists concerned, but whatever. I'd deal with my moral ambiguity later. So, what's our next move? I asked, ready to do whatever it took. We file, Amamira said simply. We file a claim for partial ownership. We file for wrongful termination. We file for damages, both monetary and reputational. And we file so many motions that her legal team will need to hire additional legal teams just to keep up with the paperwork. We're going to bury her in litigation, Logan. Not because we're mean, but because it's justified, and also a little bit because we're mean. While we were planning our legal assault, my phone buzzed with a notification that I'd stupidly not turned off. Instagram, because apparently I'm a glutton for punishment and emotional masochism. I almost ignored it, but something made me check. Probably the same instinct that makes people slow down to look at car accidents. It was Jasper. Of course, it was Jasper because the universe has a sick sense of humor and enjoys my suffering. He posted a picture of himself at a coffee shop looking thoughtful and philosophical in that way that 22-year-olds think makes them look deep, but actually makes them look constipated. The caption read, "Some men can't handle strong women. Growth means leaving toxic people behind. #BossLife #no IU worth #moving forward." I stared at my phone, reading the caption 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating from stress and too much legal coffee. This kid, this absolute muppet of a human being who probably still had his mom doing his laundry, was posting inspirational quotes about strong women and toxic people like he was Oprah instead of an intern who'd been employed for 6 weeks and had the professional skills of a potato. "You okay?" Amira asked, noticing my expression, which had probably gone from neutral to homicidal in about 3 seconds. "Jasper just posted on Instagram," I said, turning my phone to show her. "Apparently, I'm the toxic one who can't handle strong women. Me, the guy who spent 7 years building a business with his wife. I'm toxic. Not the intern who lied to get me fired, but me." Amira read the caption and I watched her jaw clench in that way. That meant she was adding this to her mental list of grievances to use in court. You know what? I'm adding defamation to the list of potential claims. That's borderline liable if anyone connects those dots to your situation, which they will because corporate circles are smaller than people think. Is that legal? I asked, not entirely sure how social media posts factored into legal battles. "Let me worry about what's legal," Amamira said, making a note on her legal pad and handwriting that looked like organized chaos. You just keep collecting evidence of their stupidity, and I'll turn it into billable hours and courtroom gold. Over the next several days, we worked like possessed people, preparing our filings with the kind of attention to detail that would make obsessive-compulsive people proud. We documented everything. Every contribution I'd made to the company, every client I'd brought in, every late night and weekend I'd worked, every financial investment I'd made from my own pocket, every email that proved my involvement, every contract with my signature, every single piece of evidence that showed I wasn't just an employee, but a founding partner who'd been illegally forced out based on false allegations from an intern with delusions of competence. Amamira put together a legal brief that was basically a novel-length documentation of Clarice's mistakes, complete with exhibits, appendices, and footnotes. It was beautiful in a very nerdy, legally aggressive way. We filed for partial ownership recognition, claiming 50% based on my initial investment and ongoing contributions. We filed for wrongful termination with evidence of the false allegations. We filed for damages including lost wages, reputational harm, and emotional distress because apparently you can put a dollar amount on. My wife believed in turnover me. And now I have trust issues. Full receipts, Amamira said, organizing the final documents into neat folders that would be delivered to the courthouse and Clarice's legal team simultaneously. Every email, every contract, every contribution, every lie they told. We're not just fighting back, Logan. We're building an airtight case that proves you were essential to that company's success and that removing you was both illegal and stupid. How long until she knows what's coming? I asked, signing my name on what felt like the 100th document. The papers will be served tomorrow morning, Amamira said, checking her watch. So, probably about 12 hours until her lawyer calls her in a panic and about 13 hours until she realizes she made a very expensive mistake. I'm going to enjoy this. Is that bad? I feel like I should feel bad about enjoying this, but I really don't. That makes two of us, I said, signing the last page with a flourish that felt unnecessarily dramatic but satisfying. We weren't just preparing a legal case. We were preparing a reckoning, the kind that comes with court dates and legal fees, and the slow, dawning realization that actions have consequences, even when you're a CEO with designer suits and an inflated sense of your own infallibility. Clarice wanted me to reflect. Well, she was about to see her own reflection in every legal document we were about to file, and it wasn't going to be pretty. The day I walked back into that company exactly 4 weeks and 2 days after being escorted out like a common criminal who'd been caught stealing printer paper, the atmosphere was so thick with tension, you could have cut it with a knife, or at least with one of those fancy letter openers executives keep on their desks to look important. People stopped mid-stride in the hallways. Coffee cups frozen halfway to mouths, conversations dying faster than my marriage had. They looked at me like I was a ghost or worse, an ex-husband with legal documents and a vendetta, which was significantly more terrifying than any supernatural entity. Sandra from accounting actually dropped her phone when she saw me walking through the lobby with a mirror at my side. Both of us dressed in business attire that screamed, "We mean business and also we have lawyers." Mike from sales pretended to be very interested in a potted plant. Literally turning his entire body to face a decorative ficus like it was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. Even Barry, the fantasy football guy who never shut up, managed to keep his mouth closed for once in his life, which was honestly kind of miraculous. The board meeting had been requested by Amira through official legal channels, which is lawyers speak for. We're coming whether you like it or not, and you have to let us in or it looks bad in court. Clarice had no choice but to agree, probably after her own lawyers told her that refusing would be admitting guilt or at least admitting that she had something to hide, which she absolutely did. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the main conference room, the big one with the glass walls and the fancy table that cost more than most people's cars. The room where major decisions were made and apparently where marriages went to die. I walked into that conference room like I own the place because legally speaking, I might actually own about half of it, and the energy shifted immediately. The board members were already seated, looking uncomfortable in that way people do when they know they're about to witness either a spectacular resolution or a complete disaster with no middle ground in sight. There was Gerald, the CFO, who'd always liked me, but also liked his paycheck more. Patricia, the head of operations, who'd gone completely silent in her emails to me after my firing, clearly choosing Team Clarice over Team Common Sense. And Marcus from HR, the same Marcus who'd sat quietly during my termination, probably practicing his "I'm just following orders" defense for later. And there, sitting at the head of the table like she still owned the entire world and everyone in it, was Clarice. She looked tired, which gave me a small amount of petty satisfaction that I'm not proud of, but also not sorry about. Her designer suit was impeccable as always, but there were slight bags under her eyes that even expensive concealer couldn't completely hide. The stress was getting to her and good. About time she felt some of what I'd been feeling for the past month. 2 seats over from her, looking significantly less confident than his Instagram post suggested, was Jasper. He was wearing a suit that still looked like it came from his dad's closet. Too big in the shoulders and slightly too short in the sleeves, trying desperately to look professional and important. He had a notepad in front of him, a fancy pen that probably cost more than it should. And he was very obviously pretending to take notes while actually doodling what looked like planets or maybe just circles, because expecting actual note-taking aching from Jasper was like expecting a goldfish to file taxes. "Logan," Clarice said, her voice strained and professional, the tone she used when she was trying very hard not to show emotion. "I'm not sure what you hope to accomplish with this meeting, but I think you know exactly what we're here to accomplish," Amamira interrupted smoothly, setting her briefcase on the table with a satisfying thud that echoed through the conference room like a judge's gavel. "But let me clarify for everyone present. We're here to present evidence regarding Mr. Harrison's ownership stake in this company, his wrongful termination, and the various legal violations that occurred during said termination. Should be fun. Well, fun for us. Anyway," she pulled out folders, so many folders, each one carefully labeled and color-coded because Amamira was nothing if not organized in her destruction of people's lives. The board members leaned forward slightly, curiosity winning over corporate loyalty. Even Gerald looked interested, probably doing mental math about how this would affect his quarterly reports. "As you all know," Amamira began opening the first folder with the kind of dramatic flair that lawyers must practice in law school. "Mr. Harrison was terminated 4 weeks ago based on allegations from an intern." She paused, looking directly at Jasper, who suddenly found his doodles very interesting. An intern who, according to his employment records, had been with the company for exactly 6 weeks at the time of his allegations and whose primary qualifications include, let me check, enthusiasm and proficiency in Microsoft Office, which I'm told is now a skill people list on resumes. Someone at the end of the table, I think it was Patricia, made a sound that could have been a cough or a suppressed laugh. "Hard to tell, but I appreciated it either way." "What's your point?" Clarice interjected. Her voice sharp with barely controlled anger. "Logan was fired for legitimate reasons. This is just a vindictive ex-husband trying to," this Amira said, pulling out a document and sliding it across the table toward the board members as proof of Mr. Harrison's initial capital investment in this company. $50,000 7 years ago when this company was just an idea and a dream. That's not an employee contribution, Mrs. Harrison. That's a founding partner investment." Clarice's face froze mid-blink like someone had hit pause on a video. The board members were passing around copies of the investment documents, and I could see the moment it clicked for each of them. Gerald's eyebrows went up. Patricia's mouth formed a small O of surprise. Even Marcus looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat like he wanted to be literally anywhere else. "This is absurd." Clarice snapped, trying to regain control of the situation. "That was a personal loan, not an investment. We were married. Couples help each other financially." "Actually," Amamira said, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "This is ownership law. Exhibit A through Z, and if it was a personal loan, as you claim, you would have loan documentation, repayment schedules, interest rates, literally any paperwork that proves it was a loan and not an investment. Do you have any of that documentation, Mrs. Harrison?" Silence. "Beautiful. Damning silence," Amamira continued, laying out document after document like she was dealing cards at the world's most aggressive poker game. "Client contracts with my signature, project proposals I'd written, email chains proving my involvement in major business decisions, patent filings with my name alongside Clarice's, financial records showing my ongoing contributions both in money and labor, well beyond what any normal employee would provide. Mr. Harrison wasn't just an employee you could terminate at will," Amamira explained to the increasingly uncomfortable board members. "He was a co-founder, a business partner, and his removal from the company based on unsubstantiated allegations from a 6-week intern constitutes not only wrongful termination, but also potential fraud regarding ownership rights." That's when Jasper, in what I can only describe as the worst decision of his young life, decided to whisper something to Clarice. He leaned over, probably trying to be subtle, maybe trying to offer some kind of support or strategy. But Amamira's hearing was apparently superhuman because she turned to face him with the kind of look that makes people reconsider their life choices. "Hush, Junior," Amamira said, her voice sweet as poison honey. "Adults are talking. This is a legal proceeding regarding business ownership and corporate law, not an internship seminar on how to destroy people's careers with lies. So maybe, just maybe, you could sit there quietly and contemplate the choices that led you to this moment." The room went completely silent. Someone at the end of the table, definitely Patricia this time, coughed to hide a laugh. Gerald wasn't even trying to hide his smile, probably enjoying the drama more than anything that had happened in a board meeting all year. Marcus looked like he wanted to sink through his chair and disappear into the floor. Jasper's face turned red, the kind of red that starts at the neck and spreads upward like a really embarrassing thermometer. He opened his mouth, probably to protest or defend himself, but Clarice put her hand on his arm, stopping him. Even she knew that letting Jasper talk right now would be like throwing gasoline on a fire that was already burning her carefully constructed empire to the ground. Clarice's empire, the one she tried to claim as solely hers, suddenly looked like a Jenga tower, missing too many blocks, wobbling precariously, and about to fall. You could see it in her eyes, the realization that she'd made a massive miscalculation, that firing me had been not just personally cruel, but legally stupid. That believing Jasper over documented evidence and 7 years of partnership had been the kind of mistake that ends careers and companies. We'll be filing formal claims for 50% ownership recognition, Amamira concluded, packing up her folders with the satisfied air of someone who just won a chess game in record time. Additionally, we're pursuing damages for wrongful termination, reputational harm, and emotional distress. My client built this company alongside Mrs. Harrison, and he deserves recognition for that contribution legally, financially, and professionally. As we stood to leave, I caught Clarice's eye one last time. She looked broken, defeated, nothing like the confident CEO who'd fired me a month ago. And I wish I could say I felt bad about it. That seeing her like this made me regret the legal action, but I'd be lying. After that boardroom meeting, something beautiful happened. And by beautiful, I mean the kind of slow-motion disaster that you can't look away from, like watching an expensive vase fall off a table in Super HD. I didn't need to lift another finger. Didn't need to make another move. Didn't need to do anything except sit back with metaphorical popcorn and watch the consequences of Clarice's terrible decisions ripple through her company like a tsunami through a sand castle convention. Whispers spread fast in corporate environments, faster than actual news, faster than emails, faster than those rumors about who hooked up at the Christmas party. By the afternoon of our boardroom presentation, everyone in that building knew something major had gone down. The details were probably wrong, exaggerated, mixed with speculation and gossip. But the core message was clear. Logan Harrison wasn't just some fired employee. He was a co-founder with legal receipts, and the CEO had royally screwed up by throwing him out over an intern's lies. I know this because Rico, who has a network of people in various industries that would make the CIA jealous, started forwarding me messages from his friend who knew someone who worked in the building. Yo, did you really walk in with a lawyer and drop documents like you were serving subpoenas at a family reunion? One message read, everyone's saying the CEO's husband owned half the company and she fired him anyway. That's wild. Also, is the intern really that incompetent or is that part exaggerated? The intern part is not exaggerated. I texted back. If anything, it's understated. The kid once asked me if PDFs were edible. That can't be real. I wish I was joking. The whispers turned into full conversations. And those conversations reached the people who actually mattered, the investors, the people with money, the people who kept the company afloat, the people who got very nervous when they heard words like ownership dispute and legal action and potential fraud. Investors are like cats, easily spooked by sudden movements and loud noises. And nothing spooks investors quite like the possibility that the company they've invested in might be built on legally questionable foundations. I heard through my network, which was apparently still functioning despite my termination, that the board started having emergency meetings, not the scheduled calendar invite type of meetings, but the everyone drop what you're doing and get in here right now panic meetings that happen when something's gone terribly wrong. They were asking awkward questions, the kind Clarice probably didn't have good answers for. Questions like, so, who's actually in charge here? Is this ownership structure legally sound? And my personal favorite. Why didn't anyone tell us there was a co-founder we were unaware of? Gerald, the CFO who I'd always gotten along with, apparently grew a spine and started asking for documentation of everything. Every decision Clarice had made regarding the company structure, every termination, every restructuring, every single piece of paper that could potentially be used in court. He was covering his own ass obviously because CFOs don't stay CFOs by going down with sinking ships. But it had the beautiful side effect of making Clarice's life absolutely miserable. Patricia from operations who ghosted me after my firing suddenly started sending apologetic emails. Logan, I had no idea about the circumstances. One read, if I'd known the full situation, I would have spoken up. Can we talk? I deleted them without responding because Patricia had every opportunity to speak up during my termination and chose silence instead. Too little, too late, Patricia. Enjoy your sinking ship. The LinkedIn updates started appearing within a week and they were absolutely delicious in their corporate speak desperation. Clarice Industries undergoing internal restructuring to better serve our clients and stakeholders. Translation: We're on fire. Please send water. Also, if anyone wants to invest, we promise we're totally fine and definitely not dealing with massive legal problems. Excited to announce organizational changes that will strengthen our foundation. Translation: Our foundation was apparently built on lies and we're frantically trying to fix it before everything collapses. Committed to transparency and excellence during this transition period. Translation: We have no idea what we're doing, but we're hoping if we use enough buzzwords, people won't notice we're panicking. I just sat in my studio apartment eating actual popcorn because the metaphorical kind wasn't satisfying enough. Refreshing LinkedIn every few hours like I was watching a reality TV show. Except this reality show was my ex-wife's professional life falling apart in real time, and I had front row seats. The best part though, the absolute cherry on top of this shot in Freud's Sunday was what happened to Jasper. Remember Jasper? The intern who started this whole mess? The kid who thought he was hot and posted inspirational quotes about toxic people and strong women while having the professional competence of a potato with a LinkedIn account. Yeah, Jasper stopped showing up to the office. At first, nobody noticed because Jasper's contributions to the company were approximately zero. So, his absence had the same impact as removing a decorative plant from the lobby. But then word started spreading that he'd been reassigned to another department, which is corporate HR speak for hiding him in a closet somewhere and hoping everyone forgets he exists. According to my sources, and by sources, I mean Rico's friend's sister, who worked 2 floors down, Jasper had been moved to some back office position doing data entry or filing or something equally mindless that even he couldn't screw up too badly. They couldn't fire him outright without it looking like they were admitting he'd lied about me, which would strengthen my legal case. But they also couldn't keep him in his previous position because everyone now knew he was either a liar or incompetent or both. So Jasper got the corporate equivalent of being sent to his room. Still technically employed, still getting a paycheck, but completely removed from anything important or visible. His Instagram went quiet, too. No more inspirational posts about boss life or knowing your worth. Either someone with a functioning brain told him to shut up, or he'd finally realized that posting about his professional wisdom while being demoted to the equivalent of an HR broom closet was not the flex he thought it was. My phone buzzed one evening while I was enjoying this slow-motion corporate collapse. A text from Clarice. Can we please talk privately? Just you and me. No lawyers, no board members. We need to discuss this situation like adults. I stared at the message for a solid minute, debating whether to respond or just let it sit there unread like a desperate text from an ex at 2 a.m. The audacity of asking for a private conversation after everything, after the public firing, after the boardroom humiliation, after choosing to believe Jasper over me, was almost impressive in its sheer nerve. Before I could even formulate a response, my phone rang. Amamira, probably sensing through some kind of lawyer telepathy that Clarice was trying to circumvent proper legal channels. Did she just text you asking to talk privately? Amamira asked without preamble. How did you know? Because I just got an email from her lawyer asking the same thing. They're panicking, Logan. They want to settle before this goes any further. Before more investors pull out, before the press gets wind of the full story. They're hoping you'll agree to some quick private settlement that makes this all go away quietly. And what do you think I should do? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. I think you should let me handle it, Amamira said. And I could hear the smile in her voice. You hired a lawyer for a reason. Let me do my job, which is to make sure they don't try to lowball you or manipulate you into accepting less than you deserve. Trust me, whatever offer they make privately will be significantly less than what we can get through proper legal channels. So, I just ignore the text. You forward it to me as evidence that they're trying to negotiate outside of proper legal representation, which actually helps our case. And then you go back to enjoying the show. Your job right now is to do nothing, which coincidentally is what Jasper is doing in his new position, except you're doing it by choice and getting paid way better for it. I forwarded the text to Amamira and blocked Clarice's number, not out of anger, but out of practicality. Every conversation we had without lawyers present was a potential minefield, and I was done stepping on mines for people who'd already blown up my life once. Sure enough, within an hour, Amamira texted me. Her lawyer responded to my response. They want to discuss settlement terms. Translation: they know they're screwed and want to minimize damage. This is good for us. Very good. I sat back on my second-hand couch in my tiny studio apartment, considerably smaller and less impressive than the home I'd shared with Clarice, and smiled. The empire was crumbling, and I hadn't even needed to push it. I just pointed out that the foundation was unstable, provided documentation proving it, and watched gravity do the rest. Somewhere across the city, Clarice was probably having an emergency meeting with her lawyers, her board, her accountants, everyone she trusted to build her empire. All of them now telling her the same thing. You screwed up and it's going to cost you. And somewhere in a back office, Jasper was probably filing documents or entering data or doing whatever meaningless task they'd assigned him. His dreams of corporate success replaced with the reality of being the guy everyone blamed for triggering a legal disaster. The official legal filing happened on a Tuesday morning precisely at 9 a.m. because Amamira believed in punctuality and also in maximizing dramatic impact. We filed for half of the company assets, half of the profit share going back 3 years, recognition as co-founder, damages for wrongful termination, and basically everything short of demanding Clarice's firstborn child. Though honestly, at this point, I wouldn't have been surprised if Amamira had found a legal precedent for that, too. The papers were served to Clarice at her office, hand-delivered by a process server who apparently reported back to Amira that the CEO had gone very pale, then very red, then asked if this was a joke before realizing that legal documents are generally not known for their sense of humor. I wasn't there for that initial moment, but I wish I had been just to see the exact second when Clarice understood the full scope of what was coming her way. That moment when it clicks that you're not just dealing with an angry ex-husband, but an angry ex-husband with documentation, legal representation, and a legitimate case that could potentially cut her empire in half like a divorce settlement from hell. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later, which in legal time is basically immediate, like the court equivalent of Amazon Prime delivery. Amamira explained that given the nature of the ownership dispute and the potential impact on the company's operations, the judge had fast-tracked our case, which was either a sign that we had a strong position or that the judge just wanted to get this mess sorted out before it turned into an even bigger mess. Either way worked for me. I showed up to the courthouse in a suit I'd borrowed from Rico, who apparently owned exactly one suit for funerals, court dates, and fancy DJ gigs, where they require not looking like a slob. It fit reasonably well, which is to say it fit better than Jasper's oversized disaster. And I looked like a functioning adult who had his life together, which was about 60% accurate on a good day. Amamira met me outside the courtroom, looking like she'd been born in a pantsuit and raised on legal briefs. "Ready?" she asked, adjusting her briefcase like a warrior, checking her weapon before battle. "As ready as I'll ever be to potentially bankrupt my ex-wife in front of a judge and several witnesses," I said, straightening my borrowed tie that Rico had tied for me because apparently I'd forgotten how ties worked since losing my job. "That's the spirit." Amamira grinned. "Remember, let me do the talking. Your job is to sit there, look wronged, but dignified, and try not to smile too much when things go our way. Judges don't like it when people look too happy about litigation." We walked into the courtroom, which was smaller than I expected, more like a conference room that someone had decorated with wood paneling and a judge's bench to make it look official. There were a handful of people already seated, the court reporter, a babe who looked bored enough to be thinking about his lunch plans, and some administrative staff who were probably wondering why they'd chosen careers in the legal system when they could have been literally anywhere else. And then there was Clarice's side of the room. She sat with her legal team, 2 lawyers in expensive suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Both of them looking like they specialized in making problems go away for wealthy clients and were currently realizing that this particular problem wasn't going away easily. Clarice herself looked like she hadn't slept in days, which gave me a small petty satisfaction that I've stopped apologizing for. Her hair was still perfect, her suit still designer, but there was something in her eyes that screamed, "I'm barely holding it together." And also deeply regretting my life choices. Jasper was not present. Thank God, because having that kid in a courtroom would have been like bringing a toddler to an opera, disruptive and pointless. Apparently, even Clarice's lawyers had enough sense to keep him away from legal proceedings where his presence would only remind everyone that this entire disaster started because she believed in turnover documented evidence. The judge entered a woman in her 50s who had the look of someone who'd seen every type of corporate drama imaginable and was thoroughly unimpressed by all of it. We stood, sat, went through the preliminary formalities, and then Amamira launched into our case with the efficiency of a lawyer who'd been preparing for this moment like it was the Super Bowl of business litigation. She laid out the evidence systematically. My initial investment, my ongoing contributions, my involvement in every major business decision, the client contracts with my signature, the intellectual property I'd helped develop, everything. She presented it like she was building a house. Each piece of evidence another brick in a structure that was becoming impossible to ignore or deny. Clarice's lawyers tried to counter, arguing that I'd been an employee, that my contributions were part of my job duties, that the initial investment was a personal loan between spouses. But their arguments sounded weak even to my admittedly biased ears. They didn't have documentation to back up the loan claim. They couldn't explain why an employee would have the level of involvement and authority that I'd clearly had. They were basically throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping something would stick, except the wall was made of Teflon and the spaghetti was undercooked. Then came the moment when the judge asked about the termination and Amamira, bless her ruthless lawyer heart, pulled out the documentation of Jasper's complaint, his employment record showing his 6-week tenure and his complete lack of qualifications or credibility. Your Honor, Amamira said, her voice calm and professional, but with an undercurrent of barely contained satisfaction. Mr. Harrison was terminated based on allegations from an intern who had been with the company for 6 weeks and whose primary qualification, according to his resume, was proficiency in Microsoft Office, which I'm told is now considered a notable skill worth listing. Someone in the back of the courtroom, I think it was the court reporter, made a sound that could have been a cough or a suppressed laugh. The judge's eyebrow raised slightly, which in judge language probably meant, are you seriously telling me this entire situation started over and in turn? That's when we got to the part about filing for half the assets and profit share. Amamira had saved this for the hearing itself, wanting maximum impact, and boy did she get it. She presented the claim formally with supporting documentation showing exactly how much the company had profited during my involvement, how much of that profit was directly tied to my work, and how much I was therefore entitled to as a founding partner who'd been illegally removed. The number was substantial, very substantial. The kind of substantial that makes people's eyes go wide and their blood pressure spike. I'm talking enough money to buy a really nice house, a really nice car, and probably a small island if I was into that sort of thing, which I wasn't. But the point stood. Clarice, who had been sitting quietly through most of the proceeding with her lawyers, probably instructing her to stay calm and professional, completely lost it. And I don't mean she got a little upset or raised her voice slightly. I mean, she full-on lost her composure in front of a judge, court staff, and multiple witnesses, which is generally considered a bad move in legal situations and also in life. You can't do this to me, she screamed, standing up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Her lawyers immediately tried to pull her back down, whispering urgently, but she wasn't having it. You can't just walk in here and demand half of everything I built. This is my company, mine. The judge banged her gavel, looking less amused and more annoyed that her Tuesday morning hearing had turned into a drama production. Mrs. Harrison, control yourself or I'll hold you in contempt. Technically, I said, and I probably should have stayed quiet, but the moment was too perfect. I can do this. I helped build it. You just made it weird by firing me over and in turn. Clarice's face went from red to purple, a color I didn't know human faces could achieve outside of cartoon characters having meltdowns. Her lawyers were frantically trying to salvage the situation, but it was like trying to unring a bell or put toothpaste back in the tube. Impossible and messy. Amamira, standing beside me with the composure of someone who'd seen this coming and had probably rehearsed her response, added calmly, Your Honor, to clarify the situation, Mrs. Harrison fired her co-founder and husband based on a rumor started by a 6-week intern with questionable competence. Congratulations, Mrs. Harrison. That's exhibit dumb in our filing under catastrophically bad business decisions. Even the baif, the guy who looked bored since we walked in, tried not to laugh. I saw his shoulders shake slightly, his mouth twitching as he fought to maintain professional composure. The court reporter had completely given up on hiding her smile, typing away while clearly enjoying the show. The judge was not amused. Counselor, while I appreciate the colorful description, let's maintain courtroom decorum. Mrs. Harrison, sit down. Now, Clarice sat, but the damage was done. She'd shown exactly what Amira wanted her to show, that she was emotional, irrational, and not the calm, calculated CEO she pretended to be. That she'd made decisions based on feelings rather than facts and that those decisions had consequences she was now facing in a court of law. The hearing wrapped up shortly after with the judge ordering both parties to attempt mediation before proceeding to full trial, which was standard procedure, but also basically the court's way of saying, figure this out before you waste more of my time and taxpayer money. As we left the courtroom, Clarice stormed out ahead of us. Her lawyer scrambling to keep up with her like ducklings following an angry mother duck. I noticed Jasper waiting in the hallway, looking nervous and out of place, probably wondering why he'd been summoned to the courthouse when he wasn't even part of the proceedings. I didn't stick around to watch their reunion. But 2 days later, I got a text from Marcus, the HR guy who'd witnessed my termination and apparently felt guilty enough to maintain some contact. Dude, the text read. She threw a stapler at him in the office. Multiple witnesses. He's filing an HR complaint. This is insane. I read the message 3 times, trying to imagine the scene. Clarice stressed beyond belief after the hearing, taking out her frustration on the intern who'd started this whole disaster, throwing office supplies like she was auditioning for a workplace violence training video. Progress, I thought, smiling at my phone. Not the kind of progress anyone should celebrate, but progress nonetheless in showing that Clarice's perfect CEO facade was cracking under pressure. I texted back. Please tell me someone got it on video. Security cameras, Marcus replied. It's going to be a whole thing. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. The mediation lasted approximately 45 minutes before Clarice's lawyers realized they were fighting a losing battle with insufficient ammunition and a client who kept making things worse every time she opened her mouth. I know this because Amira texted me updates throughout the session like she was live tweeting a sporting event, except instead of touchdowns and home runs, it was legal victories and opposition failures. They're offering 20%. One text read. I laughed. Actual laughter. Her lawyer looked offended. Another now 30%. Still laughing. Your ex-wife just called me unreasonable. The mediator sided with me. Mediation failed spectacularly, which surprised exactly nobody who'd been paying attention to this disaster since day one. You can't mediate your way out of documented evidence and legal facts. No matter how many times Clarice's expensive lawyers tried to spin the narrative or suggest creative solutions that somehow involved me getting significantly less than half of what I was legally entitled to. It was like watching someone try to negotiate gravity, noble effort, but ultimately futile and kind of embarrassing to witness. So, we went to trial, actual trial, with a judge and everything, which took another 3 weeks of preparation, depositions, and gleefully destroying every argument Clarice's legal team tried to construct. I sat through depositions where Clarice's lawyers asked me increasingly desperate questions like, did you ever express verbally that you didn't consider yourself a partner? And, isn't it true that you sometimes referred to Mrs. Harrison as your boss? To which I replied respectively, no, because I absolutely considered myself a partner, and yes, because she was also literally my boss in the day-to-day operations, but that doesn't negate my founding partner status. Karen, except I didn't actually call the lawyer Karen, but I thought it loudly. The trial itself was less dramatic than TV shows would have you believe. No surprise witnesses, no last-minute evidence reveals, no dramatic courtroom outbursts. Well, except for Clarice's previous meltdown, which everyone involved had apparently agreed to pretend didn't happen for the sake of maintaining some semblance of professional dignity. It was mostly just lawyers presenting evidence. Expert witnesses testifying about standard business practices and ownership structures, and a judge who looked increasingly convinced that Clarice had made a series of catastrophically stupid decisions and was now facing the consequences. Gerald, the CFO, was called as a witness, and watching him try to remain neutral while basically confirming everything we claimed was beautiful in a Schadenfreude kind of way. Yes, Mr. Harrison was involved in all major financial decisions. He testified under oath. Yes, his input was considered essential to company operations. Yes, I was surprised when he was terminated because his contributions were significant and well documented. Each. Yes, was another nail in Clarice's legal coffin, and I could see her lawyers deflating like sad balloons at a birthday party nobody wanted to attend. Patricia from operations also testified, trying to walk the fine line between loyalty to Clarice and not committing perjury, which resulted in a lot of "I believe so" and to my knowledge statements that basically confirmed our position without her having to explicitly betray her current employer. Smart move on her part, even if it was too little too late to redeem herself in my eyes. They even tried to call Jasper as a witness, which Amira had apparently anticipated and prepared for like a chess grandmaster seeing an opponent's move 3 turns ahead. The moment Jasper's name came up, Amira objected so fast and with so much legal precedent backing her up that the judge sustained it before Clarice's lawyers could even finish their sentence. The intern's allegations are not relevant to the ownership dispute. The judge ruled, looking tired and probably wondering why she'd chosen a career that involved listening to wealthy people argue about money. We're here to determine Mr. Harrison's stake in the company, not relitigate his termination based on questionable testimony from an unqualified source. Unqualified source that was going in my memory bank forever. Right next to Exhibit Dumb and all the other legal burns Amira had delivered throughout this process. The judge's ruling came down on a Friday afternoon, which felt appropriate given that Fridays are either the best or worst day of the week, depending on your circumstances. For me, it was about to be the best. For Clarice, well, she was about to have the kind of Friday that makes people drink entire bottles of wine and question their life choices. After reviewing the evidence presented, the judge began reading from her decision in that formal judicial voice that somehow makes everything sound more official and final. This court finds that Mr. Logan Harrison provided substantial capital investment, ongoing contributions, and essential business development that constitute founding partner status. The court recognizes Mr. Harrison's claim to 50% ownership of Clarice Industries, retroactive to the date of incorporation. I felt Amamira squeeze my hand under the table, her professional composure firmly in place, but her grip betraying her excitement. We'd won, not partially won, not technically won, but with conditions, but actually fully completely won. The judge continued outlining the specifics. Half the assets, legal acknowledgement as co-founder, profit sharing going back 3 years, damages for wrongful termination, and basically everything we'd asked for, minus the kitchen sink. Though, honestly, at this point, I wouldn't have been surprised if the judge had thrown that in, too. The total amount, when everything was calculated, was enough to make my studio apartment in Atoria seem even more ridiculous by comparison. I was about to go from sleeping on Rico's couch eating sad noodles to financially secure enough to never eat sad noodles again unless I chose to for nostalgic purposes. I looked over at Clarice's table and the sight was almost enough to make me feel bad. Almost, but not quite, because I remembered the conference room, the humiliation, the betrayal, and every shitty moment since then. She was slumped in her chair like someone had physically removed her spine. Her designer suit somehow looking less put together despite being the same expensive outfit she'd walked in wearing. Her mascara was streaking slightly, just enough to be noticeable, like she'd been crying or trying very hard not to cry and failing at the second part. Her lawyers looked defeated, resigned to the outcome they'd probably seen coming for weeks, but had been paid too much to admit out loud. They were already packing up their briefcases with the energy of people who knew they'd lost and just wanted to go home and bill their client for the time they'd spent losing. Jasper was nowhere to be seen, which I noticed immediately because his absence was somehow more noticeable than his presence ever was. No Instagram posts about personal growth, no updates about his career journey, nothing. According to Marcus' last text, Jasper had taken a leave of absence to focus on personal development, which was corporate speak for hiding from the consequences of his actions and possibly from Clarice, who threw a stapler at him. The judge adjourned, everyone stood, and suddenly it was over. Months of stress, anger, legal battles, and sleepless nights finished in a Friday afternoon ruling that took maybe 15 minutes to read aloud. Justice apparently doesn't require dramatic timing or extended monologues, just facts, evidence, and a judge who'd seen enough corporate to recognize it when presented in official legal documents. Amamira turned to me, her professional mask finally cracking into a genuine smile that made her look 10 years younger and significantly less terrifying. "We did it," she said simply. "You did it. You stood up for yourself. You had the evidence to back it up, and you won. This is what justice actually looks like, Logan. Not movie justice with dramatic speeches, but real justice with paperwork and persistence." "Thank you," I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. "Seriously, Amamira, I couldn't have done this without you. You turned my pile of angry documents into an actual case. You made them pay attention. You made them acknowledge what I contributed. That's what friends are for," she said, squeezing my shoulder. "Well, friends who went to law school and enjoy destroying people's lives legally, but mostly the friends part." We were gathering our things, preparing to leave the courtroom and celebrate with overpriced drinks and probably some gloating when Clarice approached us. Her lawyers had already left, probably eager to distance themselves from the loss and start drafting bills for their unsuccessful services. She walked over slowly, like each step required effort she barely had. And when she finally spoke, her voice cracked in a way I'd never heard before. "Logan," she said, my name coming out broken and small, nothing like the confident CEO voice she'd used to fire me. "You destroyed everything. The company, our marriage, my reputation, everything we built together. You destroyed all of it." I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt absolutely nothing except maybe mild annoyance that she was trying to make this about me destroying things when she'd been the one who started this entire disaster. "No, Clarice," I said, keeping my voice calm and even. "The way you'd explain something obvious to someone who's being deliberately obtuse. You believed a 22-year-old intern over your husband. You fired me based on lies from a kid who couldn't even spell project without Grammarly checking his work. You chose him over me over 7 years of partnership over everything we actually built together. I didn't destroy anything. I just took attendance at the funeral you created. I just showed up to document the damage you did and claimed what was legally mine." Her face crumpled, mascara now definitely streaking. And part of me, a very small part, felt something like sympathy. But the larger part, the part that had spent weeks on Rico's couch wondering what I'd done to deserve this, felt nothing but satisfaction that she finally understood the consequences of her choices. "But we could have worked it out," she whispered, one last desperate attempt at rewriting history. "We could have talked, compromised, found a solution that didn't involve lawyers and judges and destroying the company. We could have," I agreed, If you'd believed me instead of Jasper. If you'd investigated his claims instead of immediately siding with him. If you'd treated me like your partner instead of a disposable employee, but you didn't. You made your choice, Clarice. This is just me making mine. I walked past her, a mirror of following, and we left the courtroom without looking back. Behind us, I heard Clarice make a sound that might have been a sob or might have been just a sharp breath. But I didn't turn around to check. That chapter of my life was officially closed, sealed with a judge's signature and legal recognition of everything I'd contributed. As we exited the courthouse into the Friday afternoon sunshine, Amamira pulled out her phone, probably to call her office or maybe to order celebratory drinks, but then she paused and looked at me with a mischievous grin. You know what? You should start a consultancy for betrayed spouses. Seriously, help other people who've been screwed over by partners who believe the wrong people. You could call it reflect and collect since that seems to be the theme here. I'm only partially joking. I think there's actually a market for that. I laughed, genuinely laughed for the first time in months. Reflect and collect. I love it, though. I feel like the target demographic is pretty niche. You'd be surprised. Amira said corporate betrayal is more common than people think. You could be the poster child for taking back what's yours with documentation and determination. Very inspiring, very marketable. I'll add it to my list of post-divorce career options, I said, right below surf instructor and above professional grudge holder. We walked toward the subway, the Manhattan afternoon bustling around us with people who had no idea that someone's life had just been legally validated and someone else's empire had just been legally dismantled. Just another Friday in New York. Just another court case. Just another story of consequences catching up with choices. But for me, it was everything. Weeks later, Claricia sold the office to cover her legal costs and settlement payments. The company we built together became a shell of its former self, downsized and struggling. A cautionary tale whispered about in business circles. Meanwhile, I started my own consulting agency. Lean, fast, and completely drama-free. My new assistant, Tracy, actually knows the difference between a meeting and a meltdown, which is refreshing. One morning, an email from an investor appeared. Glad to see you back, Logan. The industry missed your sanity. That's when it hit me. The best revenge wasn't winning in court. It was living better than before, building something new without the baggage. I donated part of my settlement to fund internships for underprivileged students, the kind who actually earn them. Named it the Reflect program just for irony. Every now and then I hear Clarice's name in business gossip, usually followed by lawsuit or HR scandal. I just sip my coffee and smile because when life throws you out over a lie, the only thing better than revenge is watching them trip over the truth you left behind. Sometimes karma needs a paper trail. And I provided the receipts. Story 2. At the company's meeting, my wife's father, the CEO, said coldly, "We're letting you go. Performance issues." When I got home, my wife handed me a list of homeless shelter and said, "Now that you're jobless, I don't need you anymore." I left silently. Few days later, she and her father called me 164 times. After realizing who I really was, there's a certain kind of silence in corporate boardrooms that feels like a funeral for your paycheck. That's the sound I walked into that morning, 15 minutes early, because being punctual is apparently the last shred of professionalism I have left. The place looked like it was designed by someone who thought emotionally cold was a color palette. Mahogany table so polished you could perform surgery on it. Chrome chairs that squeak just enough to remind you you're replaceable. An air conditioning set to polar betrayal. I took my usual seat near the middle because I'm a humble man. Humble enough to pretend I wasn't married to the CEO's daughter, and humble enough to keep showing up despite knowing every meeting felt like a trap dressed in a tie. At the head of the table sat Gregory Whitmore, founder, CEO, and self-appointed god of Whitmore Systems. He was the kind of man who made motivational posters obsolete because he sucked the motivation out of everyone in a 10-foot radius. Next to him sat Tracy from HR, whose personality was somewhere between a beige wall and a dial-up tone, and two board members who looked like they'd rather fake their own deaths than attend another one of these. I sat down, nodded politely, and waited for the inevitable. "Evan," Gregory started, his voice smoother than a tax audit. "Thank you for joining us." "Oh, it's my pleasure, Greg. I love being ambushed before breakfast." He shuffled some papers dramatically, probably for effect since men like him think rustling paper equals authority, and gave me a smile so forced it might have needed physical therapy afterward. "We've reviewed your department's performance," he continued. "And unfortunately, the results aren't meeting expectations. Now, for context, my department's results were responsible for saving this company from 3 cyber attacks, optimizing their system efficiency by 41% and boosting their annual report credibility enough to keep Gregory's yacht dreams alive. But sure, performance issues. I resisted the urge to laugh because HR was there and Tracy documents joy as a disciplinary concern. Performance issues. I repeated, keeping my voice calm, though internally I was performing stand-up comedy in my head. That's interesting considering last quarter's numbers beat projections by what was it? 1.5 miles. Gregory gave me that corporate smirk, the kind rich men practice in the mirror when they know they've already won. This isn't personal, Evan. It's business. The universal line people use right before they stab you with a smile. He slid an envelope toward me like it contained anthrax. Your termination letter effective immediately. He even had the nerve to use my full name on the top line, Mr. Evan Rivers. Like he was addressing a defendant. Security will escort you out after you clear your desk. Now, here's the thing about being married to your boss's daughter. You know when he's bluffing because the man's ego can't resist performing. He expected me to argue, to beg, to maybe gravel a little, maybe pull the "I'm your son-in-law" card. Instead, I smiled. Not the polite kind, the slow, unsettling one that makes people check if their wallets are still there. No need, I said, standing up. I remember the way out. It's right past the people I made rich. Tracy blinked. One of the board members coughed into his tie to hide a laugh. Gregory froze for a second, like someone had glitched his software. I took the letter, tucked it neatly into my briefcase like it was an invitation to my own liberation, and buttoned my jacket. As I headed for the door, I caught my reflection in the glass, calm, collected, but with that twitch of disbelief you get when you realize the people you helped climb the ladder are now kicking it away. Gregory said something as I reached for the handle. Something like, "You'll regret this." But it came out muffled, drowned under the weight of his own arrogance. Walking out, the office looked different, like I'd been watching it under a filter, and someone finally turned it off. The interns avoided eye contact. The receptionist gave me that, "I wish I could hug you, but HR has cameras." Look, my ID badge felt heavier than usual. Symbolic maybe, or just irony's way of saying hello. I dropped the badge into the security tray and walked through the revolving door like a man exiting a cult. The cold air hit me like freedom wearing cologne. I half expected someone to run after me, shouting, "Just kidding." But no, silence. Pure uncut silence. The kind that says, "You're finally out, man." On the way to the parking lot, I thought about how surreal it all felt. Fired by my father-in-law for performance issues. This is the same man who once told me I was the future of Whitmore Systems. I guess the future got too smart for comfort. Maybe he thought getting rid of me would tighten his control. News flash, it just loosened my leash. By the time I got into my car, a black 2018 Tesla that Alyssa always said made me look like I was compensating for something. I was oddly calm. No screaming, no cursing, no dramatic soundtrack swelling in the background, just a quiet hum of realization. They thought they'd ended me, but they'd just signed a sequel. I drove out of the parking lot, past the building that had been both my paycheck and my prison. And as I waited at the red light, I saw Gregory's reflection in the mirrored lobby window, standing, arms folded, staring after me like a king watching a pawn escape the board. I gave a little wave, the kind that says, "You'll miss me when your servers crash," and pulled away. Traffic was light. The radio played some upbeat song that didn't match my mood. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was on someone else's schedule. My phone buzzed twice. "Alyssa." I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to explain to my wife that Daddy Dearest had just fired me. Knowing her, she'd probably asked if it meant she had to cancel her spa appointment. Halfway home, I stopped for coffee at this hole-in-the-wall diner where the waitress called everyone Han. And the coffee tasted like ambition and regret. I sat by the window, took a sip, and finally laughed. Not a bitter laugh, more like the kind that bubbles up when you realize the joke's on them. They thought they'd thrown me out. They'd actually set me free. Still, I replayed the meeting in my head. Every detail, every micro-expression, because I knew Gregory's type, men who confused control with competence. He'd built an empire on fear, on intimidation, on the idea that everyone was replaceable. Everyone except him. And that, my friend, is the Achilles heel of every self-made tyrant. They think they're invincible right up until the moment they trip over their own ego. I finished my coffee, left a tip big enough to make the waitress smile, and walked out with one clear thought. They had no idea who they just fired. They thought they'd taken my job, but they'd forgotten. I built the damn foundation they were standing on. Literally. As I got back into my car, The sun broke through the clouds in that dramatic movie way, like the universe was throwing me a bone. I turned the ignition, grinned, and said to myself, "Congratulations, Evan. You just attended your own freedom party. Dress code fired. You expect sympathy. Maybe a shoulder squeeze, or at least a 'we'll get through this' speech." What I got was my wife Alyssa sitting at the kitchen island in silk pajamas that probably cost more than my first car. Swirling wine like she was auditioning for a commercial called Divorce the Prequel. She barely looked up from her phone. "You're home early," she said in that tone people use when the pizza arrives before they're ready to tip. "Yeah," I said, setting my briefcase down. The company decided to go in a different direction. Apparently, that direction doesn't include me. Her head snapped up and I swear her eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning and she just unwrapped a new personality disorder. "Wait, you got fired?" she asked, leaning forward, smile creeping across her face like she'd been waiting for this exact headline. If love is patient and kind, whatever this was belonged in a horror movie. She reached into her designer tote, her emotional support purse, and slid a folded piece of paper across the marble countertop. It had that crisp, deliberate fold of something pre-planned. I unfolded it and found a list of homeless shelters. I blinked, looked at her, looked back at the list. Each shelter was neatly highlighted in pink with one circled and a note scribbled beside it. "Free Wi-Fi." She sipped her wine like a Bond villain. "Now that you're jobless," she said, "I don't need you anymore." There's a moment in every man's life when he realizes he's not part of a marriage. He's part of someone's brand. This was mine. I stared at her, trying to process how a woman who once cried because I forgot to buy oat milk now looked like she was about to write an eviction notice on my forehead. "You had this ready?" I said, not really asking. She shrugged. "Greg told me last week that things weren't going well at work. I figured this was coming." Yes, Greg, father of the year, destroyer of careers, and apparently the family grapevine. "So," I said, trying not to laugh. "You had time to make a list. That's considerate. You even picked one with free Wi-Fi. Thoughtful." She didn't even blink. "You're not funny, Evan. You've been dragging me down for years. My friends are moving forward in life, getting sponsorships, launching brands, marrying up, and here you are still playing tech boy." I almost wanted to applaud. The audacity was Olympic level. "Tech boy? You mean the guy who's been paying for your yoga retreats, your car, and the half of this house your brand deals haven't touched?" "Details," she said with a smirk, pouring herself another glass of wine. "You should have aimed higher." I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. "Funny thing, Alyssa, you said the same thing on our wedding night. That got a glare sharp enough to slice marble." She stood, the robe falling slightly off her shoulder like she practiced dramatic exits for sport. "You're not going to beg?" she asked, almost disappointed. "No," I said. "I don't do sequels." I grabbed my bag, just a duffel with some essentials, and started walking toward the door. She followed, laughing. "Where are you even going? You don't have a job. You don't have a place. What? You think you're just going to wander off into the sunset like some movie hero?" I looked back at her, smiling. "No, Alyssa. I'm going to go find peace. You should try it sometime." Her face twisted. "You'll come crawling back." "Probably not. But hey," I said, patting the counter where her wine glass sat. "Cheers to wishful thinking." I left before she could reply. The door clicked shut behind me, and I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for years. The night air hit different, sharp, honest, almost friendly. I tossed my bag in the trunk and sat there for a moment, staring at the steering wheel. My reflection in the rear-view mirror looked like someone halfway between heartbroken and free. Maybe both. I laughed quietly to myself, fired by my father-in-law, dumped by my wife, and gifted a list of homeless shelters. You couldn't script irony better if you tried. I started the car and drove aimlessly for a while, the radio humming low. My phone buzzed with notifications, emails from Whitmore Systems HR. Exit procedure nonsense. The kind of digital paperwork that officially turns you into a ghost in their system. I ignored it. I was done being their punchline. I pulled into a 24-hour diner somewhere off the highway, the kind of place where the lights flicker like they're haunted and the menu hasn't been updated since Y2K. I ordered a black coffee and a slice of pie. I didn't really want because apparently that's what unemployed guys do when their lives implode. They develop a sudden appreciation for diner desserts. As I stirred the coffee, I thought about Alyssa's face when she handed me that brochure. She wasn't angry or hurt. She was pleased. Like firing me was her glow-up moment. The influencer wife finally free from her boring IT husband. The same woman who couldn't reset her Wi-Fi password without texting me in tears. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. The waitress came by refilling my cup. "You okay, huh? You look like you just lost your job and your wife in the same day." I chuckled. "You psychic or just observant?" "Observant," she said. "Men who order pie at 10 p.m. usually got stories?" "Yeah," I said, smirking. "Mine's called I Married My Boss's Daughter." "Spoiler alert, it ends badly," she laughed, shaking her head. "Well, at least you're laughing. That's something." It was because under the chaos, under the sting, there was something else simmering. Relief. A strange liberating kind of peace that comes when you realize the worst has already happened and you're still breathing. I finished the pie, paid, and headed back to my car. The dashboard clock read 11:32 p.m. I sat there for a second, staring at my phone. One missed call from Alyssa, probably wondering if I'd checked into Hope Shelter with Wi-Fi yet. I ignored it. Then another came in from an unknown number. "Mr. Rivers, this is Carl from Whitmore System Security." Sir, we didn't realize you still had access to the system servers. Could you, please confirm?" I hung up before he finished. Oh, I still had access. All right. And unlike Greg, I knew exactly how much that access was worth. As I leaned back in my seat, the first real smile of the night spread across my face. They thought they'd buried me. They just handed me a shovel, and I was about to start digging in the other direction. I started the car again, this time with purpose. The road ahead looked open, dark, full of possibilities and revenge. Maybe sweet, calculated revenge. The kind that doesn't need shouting, just strategy. And as I pulled away from the diner, Alyssa's list of shelters sat folded on the passenger seat. I picked it up, glanced at it, and laughed out loud. Then I rolled down the window, and let it fly into the night air. Because if she thought I was homeless, she clearly forgot who built the house in the first place. Leaving without a fight sounds noble until you're packing a duffel bag with the same calm energy of someone deleting their entire Spotify playlist after a breakup. I didn't throw a tantrum, didn't smash a single wine glass, mainly because all the expensive ones were technically hers. I just left silent, composed, and inconveniently dignified. But inside, my brain was hosting a full-blown fireworks show of rage and relief. When I closed the door behind me, I felt the kind of quiet that usually follows an explosion. I checked into a small apartment across town, the kind of place where the walls had seen things and didn't judge you for yours. It wasn't luxury, no marble countertops or scent diffusers shaped like swans, but it was mine. I paid 6 months up front in cash because, contrary to popular belief and my wife's assumptions, I wasn't broke. Not even close. Alyssa thought I was out there looking for a shelter with free Wi-Fi. Bless her clueless little heart. My father-in-law thought I'd be graveling for mercy within the week. Cute. What neither of them knew was that my bank accounts had layers like onions, or better yet, offshore onions. Cayman onions. See, years ago, I learned that marrying into power means learning to play the long game. While Gregory Whitmore was busy building his empire of overpriced mediocrity, I was quietly building something smarter. My secret project, Nexaware Technologies, started as a hobby, something I worked on during those useless IT support shifts Greg forced on me. I remember him saying once, "Son, some people are visionaries and some just fix the Wi-Fi." I smiled that day because I already knew which one I was. Nexaware was a cybersecurity platform so advanced even Whitmore Systems couldn't crack it, and they tried. 3 years ago when they acquired it, Greg strutted around like he'd made the deal of the century. The acquisition documents were clean, the money wired, and the patent secured under a shell company name he didn't think twice about. E. Rivers Innovations. Guess what the E stands for? Greg Evan Rivers. Me. What no one realized was that I never sold the controlling license. I sold them access, temporary renewable access, tied to a separate holding company registered offshore. They thought they bought a product. What they really bought was a subscription with me as the admin. 12% ownership remained mine, hidden, legal, and quiet. It was like owning the land beneath someone's mansion and waiting for the day they forgot to pay rent. So technically, when Gregory fired me, he also fired his biggest silent investor. Poetic, isn't it? The man spent years reminding me that I was lucky to be family. Turns out he was the one living off my coat. I sat on the Warren couch in my new apartment that night, scrolling through the news on my laptop. Whitmore Systems had just posted a glowing press release, Strategic Leadership Realignment to Enhance Operational Efficiency. Translation: they fired the son-in-law and hoped the stock wouldn't notice. I chuckled and poured myself a drink from the mini bar. Cheap whiskey, but somehow it tasted like champagne. Then came the texts. Alyssa predictably first. "You really left?" I stared at the message for a good minute before replying. "Yep. Even pack the air you breathe. Then I muted her thread. Next, a message from an unknown number. Mr. Rivers, this is Kevin from Accounts. Just a heads up, the Whitmore server renewal date is approaching. Are you handling the license renewal or should we contact Nexaware directly? I smiled. Oh, Kevin. Sweet. Oblivious Kevin. I typed back, leave it with me. Because I already knew exactly what I was going to do. The next morning, I woke up at 5:30, not out of discipline, but habit. Years of early meetings had programmed me like a lab rat. I made coffee, opened my laptop and started running diagnostics on the Nexaware backend. Watching those systems hum in real time, knowing every alert, every password, every key file belonged to me was better than therapy. Whitmore Systems' entire security infrastructure ran on my software, their contracts, their client databases, their internal communications, all of it. I ran a test lockdown just for fun. For 20 glorious seconds, Whitmore Systems' firewall went dark. Then I restored it like a god playing peekaboo. That's when it hit me. Silence is louder when it's planned. I decided then and there I wouldn't rant, wouldn't confront, wouldn't seek revenge with fireworks. No, my revenge would sound like a slow tightening valve. The kind that leaves them gasping before they even realize who's holding the handle. By noon, I'd set up a new LLC under another alias. Rivers Consulting Group. The name sounded boring enough to avoid suspicion, but important enough to get taken seriously. I opened new accounts, restructured my remaining assets, and funneled the Nexaware ownership into a trust. Not the kind of trust you name your kids in. This one had clauses that would make Wall Street lawyers weep. If anything happened to me, the controlling rights reverted to my mother's foundation. Not Alyssa, not Gregory, not anyone with the last name Whitmore. At 2 p.m. I got a call from Marcus, my oldest friend and the only person who knew half of my plan. Heard the news, he said. You alive or plotting a Netflix special? Both, I replied, sipping my coffee. Marcus laughed. So, what's next? You going to torch their servers or meditate your way to forgiveness? Neither, I said. I'm going quiet. Quiet? He repeated skeptical. You don't do quiet. Exactly, I said. That's why it'll work. That night, as I walked down the street toward a corner store to grab dinner because apparently revenge planning burns calories, I passed a billboard for Whitmore Systems' new ad campaign. Innovation built on integrity. I laughed so hard a stranger looked concerned. If only they knew the foundation of that slogan was currently sitting in my laptop, sipping whiskey, and reprogramming destiny. I got back to the apartment, microwaved some instant noodles, and watched the city lights flicker outside the window. Somewhere across town, Alyssa was probably live streaming her heartbreak for sympathy points. Gregory was probably polishing his whiskey decanter, believing he'd cut out the weak link. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my tiny apartment, grinning like a man who just realized he owned the chessboard. There's a power in walking away without slamming doors. People mistake your silence for defeat, but really it's you taking notes. Every insult, every dismissal, every smug smirk, they all become data points in a blueprint for payback. And trust me, mine was already in version 2.0. Before going to bed, I checked one last thing, the Nexaware renewal contract. Expiration 7 days. 7 days before Whitmore Systems would realize just how much of their kingdom rested on borrowed ground. I closed my laptop, turned off the light, and laid back on the couch, smiling into the darkness. They thought I'd walked away empty-handed. But here's the truth. When you're the architect of the system, even the wreckage belongs to you. 3 years before that boardroom firing squad, before Alyssa perfected her, I married down routine. And before I learned that silence could ruin empires, I was just the tech guy in a corner cubicle of Whitmore Systems. Gregory Whitmore, my beloved father-in-law and part-time Bond villain, had generously offered me a starting position. Translation: know your place, marry the daughter, and maybe if you kiss enough corporate rings, you'll be allowed to fetch coffee at executive meetings. I still remember the first day. He walked me around the office like I was a rescued stray dog. He was proud to domesticate. Everyone, this is Evan, he said, clapping my back with the kind of enthusiasm that hurts your kidneys. He's Alyssa's husband and our new IT support specialist. The crowd gave polite smiles, the kind people say for toddlers, showing off finger paintings. Work your way up. Earn your stripes, Gregory said, handing me a laptop that looked like it survived the Cold War. That was his mantra. What he meant was, I own you now, son. But here's the thing. When someone treats me like I'm beneath them, my brain goes into what I call hidden genius mode. It's that mental gear where you pretend to follow orders while secretly rewriting the universe behind their back. So, while Greg thought he had me buried in help desk tickets, resetting passwords, removing viruses caused by interns watching sketchy anime. I was quietly building the skeleton of something that would one day make him sweat through his imported suits. Let's talk about those passwords for a second. The CEO of a multimillion-dollar tech company used Gregory 123. No, I'm not kidding. When the man who lectures others about cybersecurity protects his empire with the enthusiasm of a MySpace user, you know you're in for a ride. Every time he forgot his password, he'd summon me to his office like a tech priest. I'd stand there watching him type the same wrong thing over and over while muttering, "I don't know what's wrong. It worked yesterday." "Yeah, Greg. And so did your metabolism." Anyway, during one of those emergency IT sessions, I realized how much access I actually had. The man gave me full admin privileges across half the company's systems, thinking I'd only use them to fix printers. Bless his arrogance. I started using my downtime to write lines of code, snippets, algorithms, entire frameworks that would one day become Nexaware's foundation. I'd run simulations after hours, encrypt everything under my alias E-Rivers, and store the data in a cloud server he didn't even know existed. Meanwhile, Alyssa was too busy curating her online life to notice. Every night, she'd sit on the couch with her laptop, rehearsing her influencer voice. "Hey guys, it's Alyssa here. Remember to subscribe for my self-care secrets." Meanwhile, I was in the home office writing security architecture that would make the NSA blush. Our marriage was basically two people living in parallel universes. Hers made of filters and hashtags. Mine made of firewalls and revenge potential. At board dinners, Greg loved mocking me in front of everyone. He'd say things like, "You know, Evan here is great with computers. He's basically my in-house tech support." Everyone laughed, including Alyssa, who once added, "Yeah, he even fixes my phone when I drop it in my mimosa." Ha ha, hilarious. I smiled, nodded, and mentally filed away each humiliation under future payback material because that's how hidden genius mode works. You collect insults like receipts. What Greg didn't know was that every time he bragged about his company's next security line, he was really talking about my code. I was the one writing the algorithm that detected intrusion patterns and automated risk isolation. The company thought they were testing a prototype designed by their R&D team. Nope, that was me. E-Rivers Innovations, quietly patenting every single improvement under my mother's maiden name. By the time the patents were approved, I legally owned the digital backbone of their system. I even got a congratulatory email from the US Patent Office while I was unclogging Tracy from HR's printer jam. Talk about poetic balance. Now, don't get me wrong, I wasn't out to destroy Greg. Not at first. I just wanted to build something of my own, something that wasn't constantly under his thumb. But every smug smirk, every dismissive, "Maybe next time, Evan," every time he corrected me in meetings just to hear himself sound smarter, it all added up. By the end of my second year, I realized I didn't just want independence. I wanted leverage. And leverage, my friend, is an art form. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's hidden in contracts, in code, in fine print. So, while Greg believed he was investing in a tech acquisition to boost his market share, I was quietly positioning myself as the invisible landlord of his empire. The Nexaware deal came up in a board meeting one summer afternoon. Greg strutted into my cubicle later and said, "We just acquired a small cybersecurity firm for peanuts. Should make us bulletproof." I nodded, pretending to be impressed. "Wow, great move, sir," he laughed. "Yeah, they're founders anonymous. Some genius who doesn't understand valuation. Idiot probably sold us a gold mine for scrap metal." Oh, Greg, if I'd had popcorn, that moment would have been cinematic. By year 3, I had everything set. The code was fully integrated, the licenses automated to expire on a schedule only I could renew, and the patents watertight. I was a ghost in his system, a line of code he'd never see coming. But I still showed up every day like a model employee. Fixed printers, updated firmware, smiled during meetings while he bragged about his software saving the company millions. I even clapped during his presentations. That's how you hide a revolution. You act like a fan. The final straw came one Friday evening. Greg was hosting his annual corporate gala complete with a live band and enough champagne to drown a horse. I was at the buffet table enjoying my only payment-free food when he approached with a martini in hand. "You know, Evan," he said loudly. "If you ever get tired of tech support, maybe we'll find you something in the mailroom." Everyone around him laughed. Alyssa joined in, hand on his arm, eyes gleaming. I smiled and said, "Sure thing, sir. Maybe someday I'll run this place from the basement." He chuckled over my dead body. Funny how life foreshadows itself. That night, I went home, opened my laptop, and looked at the digital fortress I'd built. Every line of code, every algorithm, every hidden control, all waiting. I didn't press the red button, of course. Not yet. But I saved the file under a new name, insurance policy. From then on, every condescending look Greg threw my way felt lighter. Every dismissive remark from Alyssa rolled right off because deep down I knew something they didn't. They'd built their world on the foundation of my genius. And one day they'd learn that foundations have expiration dates. So yeah, Greg built a company. But me, I built the back door. When you've spent years being underestimated, revenge doesn't arrive like thunder. It arrives like an email notification. Quiet, polite, devastating. The day after my silent relocation, I woke up to sunlight bouncing off my laptop and the sweet aroma of justice brewing in my coffee maker. My plan was simple. Cut the oxygen supply. Not metaphorically, financially, emotionally, digitally. I've been married into the Whitmore dynasty long enough to know where every artery was, and more importantly, which ones they didn't even know existed. Step 1, joint credit cards. Those lovely little rectangles that funded Alyssa's influencer lifestyle. Frozen one click and her Starbucks points were officially on life support. I imagined her face at some designer boutique card declined, voice quivering as she said, "That's impossible. I'm married to a Whitmore." "No, sweetie. You were married to a Rivers and he's done financing your delusion." Step 2, the private family trust account. Gregory always bragged about how bulletproof his family assets were. Bulletproof, sure, but not event-proof. The trust had a small maintenance clause tied to an old Nexaware subroutine, something no one ever noticed because it sounded like tech gibberish. The clause said that if the company's main server failed to validate the software license, the trust account's automated investment feed would pause. So, I paused it. Not enough to alert the bank, just enough to make Gregory's precious balance sheets twitch. Step 3, the masterpiece. Whitmore Systems Core Security Framework License. My license renewal date today. Their IT team probably thought it was a routine auto-renewal. Wrong. I declined it. Just click no, that's all. One single click and the company's firewall started coughing like a 90-year-old smoker. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee, watching the digital chaos unfold through my private dashboard. Within an hour, I could see the internal pings escalating. System error detected. Client access unavailable. Network performance unstable. A music Gregory's company was glitching harder than a reality show reunion. By day 2, I got a text from Marcus. "Dude, you're on fire. Literally every tech forum is roasting Whitmore Systems." I chuckled and replied, "Oh, must be a sunspot problem." By day 3, Gregory's secretary accidentally called me by mistake. Right. Her tone had that mix of panic and politeness usually reserved for people talking to kidnappers. "Mr. Rivers. Hi. Hi. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Some of our systems are experiencing downtime, and Mr. Whitmore was wondering if you could take a look." "Oh, sure," I said cheerfully. "Just have him submit a support ticket through the employee portal." She hesitated. That portal seems to be down, too." I smiled into the phone. "Well, that's inconvenient." By day 5, I woke up to 164 missed calls, most from numbers I recognized. A few from Gregory's lawyer, one from Alyssa, which I ignored because peace and stupidity don't mix. The news headlines were starting to catch wind of the unexplained disruptions at Whitmore Systems. Stock dropped 7%. I made pancakes. Later that day, I went grocery shopping. I was halfway down the cereal aisle when a familiar voice called out, "Evan." It was Brent, one of the junior developers from Whitmore. The kid looked frazzled, like someone who hadn't slept since dial-up. "Man, it's chaos in there," he said, grabbing his head. "Everything's failing. The backup servers are looping and Greg's in full meltdown mode. Rumor is they're calling in an external consultant." "Oh," I said casually, tossing a box of Frosted Flakes into my basket. "Hope they find someone qualified," he laughed nervously. "You always said they didn't pay attention to infrastructure risks." "Guess you were right." "Guess so," I said, smiling. "Take care, Brent. And hydrate." When I got home, I checked my phone again. Another message from Alyssa. "Dad wants to talk. Just pick up already, please." I didn't reply. Instead, I sent a polite email to Gregory's assistant. "Dear Miss Sanders, I appreciate your outreach regarding the recent system instability. Unfortunately, I'm unavailable for consulting at this time. However, I can refer you to a capable IT firm once I finish my pancake." Then, I signed it with warm regards, Evan Rivers, founder, Nexaware Technologies. By day 7, the full meltdown hit. Gregory himself called me. I almost didn't pick up, but the temptation was too good. "Evan," he said, his voice. "We need to talk." "I thought you fired me, Greg," I said calmly. "Corporate restructure, remember? That was a mistake," he admitted. "Look, the system failures. These aren't normal. We're bleeding contracts. I know you had access. Maybe there's something you can do to help." There it was. The crack in the king's crown. "Sure, I could help," I said, keeping my tone even. "But that would mean revisiting my role and my compensation and my respect, which last I checked was terminated without notice." He exhaled that deep sigh of a man who finally realizes his empire's built on sand. "Evan, name your price." I pretended to think. "I'll get back to you." Then I hung up and laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. It wasn't about the money. Not anymore. It was about making him feel the helplessness he dished out so casually all those years. That night, Marcus came over with beers. "So, you're officially a cyber ghost haunting your ex-boss's servers," he said. "How's that feel?" "Peaceful," I replied, clinking bottles like a digital spa day. We sat on the balcony overlooking the city. He whistled. "You ever going to tell him the full truth that you own the system?" "Eventually," I said. "Right now, I'm enjoying the foreplay." He laughed. "You're insane." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'm interesting." By midnight, Whitmore Systems' official website had crashed. Their social media page posted an apology so vague it could have been written by a magic 8-ball. I watched it all unfold, not with glee. Exactly. More like satisfaction. Years of swallowing insults, of smiling through disrespect, of fixing problems I didn't cause. It all led to this symphony of digital karma. Somewhere in their glass tower, Gregory was probably pacing, yelling at everyone but himself, wondering how his incompetent son-in-law could have possibly left such a hole. And Alyssa, she was likely posting a cryptic quote on Instagram like, "Sometimes endings are new beginnings." Crescent moon sparkles #healing #self-love. Cute. What they didn't realize was that my silence wasn't weakness. It was preparation. Every smile I gave, every "yes, sir," I uttered. Every late night of uncredited work, it all built the stage for this. Revenge isn't rage, it's patience in a suit. So yeah, the company was spiraling. The Whitmore were sweating. And me, I was in my little apartment making pancakes and planning my next move because phase 1 was over. Phase 2, the return was about to begin. And trust me, when I walk back into that boardroom, it won't be as an employee. It'll be as the man they never saw coming. There are moments in life that feel cinematic, even without the background music. And walking back into Whitmore Systems was one of them. 3 weeks after Greg's performance issues stunt, I stood outside the same glass doors I'd been escorted through like an unwanted Amazon return. Only this time, I wasn't coming as the IT guy or the obedient son-in-law. I was walking in as the man holding 70% of their digital oxygen supply. The building looked the same, sleek, sterile, humming with self-importance, but it smelled different. Panic has a scent, and this place reeked of it. The receptionist, bless her, froze when she saw me. "Mr. Rivers," she said as if saying my name might trigger an alarm. "Do you have an appointment?" I smiled. "No, but your CEO does." She blinked twice, probably calculating whether letting me in counted as career suicide. "I'll notify Mr. Whitmore." "Do that," I said, "and tell him it's urgent from his biggest investor." That line worked faster than caffeine. Within minutes, Greg's assistant appeared, visibly sweating. "Mr. Rivers, right this way." She tried to sound composed, but her voice had that quiver you hear right before someone's annual review. The elevator ride up was quiet, except for the faint ping of emails flooding her phone. When the doors opened, I was greeted by chaos wrapped in business casual. The boardroom was packed. Gregory pacing like a caged lion. Board members whispering. HR pretending to take notes like anyone cared. Tracy from HR shot me a look that said, "Oh God, he's back." Which only made me smile wider. Gregory turned when he heard the door close. His face went pale, the kind of pale reserved for ghosts and freshly fired CEOs. "Evan," he said, voice tight. "You came?" "I was invited," I said, dropping my briefcase onto the table with a satisfying thud. And honestly, Greg, I missed the ambience. Nothing like corporate despair in the morning. The room went silent except for the air conditioner trying its best to cool the tension. I took the seat at the end of the table, the seat Gregory had always occupied. He frowned. "That's my seat." I leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. "Not today." For a few seconds, no one moved. The board members shifted uncomfortably, unsure who technically outranked who at this point. I opened my folder, neatly printed financials, legal notices, and one thick envelope labeled license agreement. Nexaware Technologies. Let's make this simple. I said 70% of your company's infrastructure runs on software owned by Nexaware Technologies. As of last week, that license expired, which means legally every major client contract tied to that software is in breach. Tracy blinked, her pen hovering uselessly over her notepad. One of the board members, a tall guy named Richard, who always smelled like expensive regret, cleared his throat. You mean to say the company doesn't own its primary framework? I smiled. Oh, they thought they did. They paid for access, not ownership. There's a difference. You'd be amazed how many executives don't read the fine print. Greg's jaw tightened. You deceived us. No, I said. I did my job. You just assumed that meant you owe me too. He slammed a hand on the table, his voice rising. You sabotaged my company. Correction, I said calmly. Our company? You just didn't realize I was on the ownership side. The room murmured. Someone whispered. Is this legal? Another replied, it's brilliant. I continued, sliding a few printed pages across the table. Here's the fun part. While your team's been trying to fix your technical issues, I've been running an audit. Turns out your daughter's little consulting firm has been receiving quarterly transfers from Whitmore Systems, amounting to roughly $1.2 million. No invoices, no contracts, no deliverables. Greg blinked. That's impossible. Oh, I agree, I said. That's why I printed the receipts. Literally, I flipped open a binder and turned it toward him. Neat columns of wire transfers, all linked to Alyssa's company. A Whitmore Creative Partnerships LLC. Tracy's jaw dropped. That violates corporate ethics policy section. Save it, Tracy. I interrupted. We all know HR's ethics policy is mostly for decoration. Greg looked like someone had unplugged him. You had access to all this. Greg, I build all this. You gave me full back-end admin access when you made me your IT guy, remember? Said you trusted family. That was your first mistake. A long silence followed. You could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing. One board member finally spoke. So, what do you want, Mr. Rivers? I looked around the room, taking my time, letting them stew in the discomfort. I want this company to run honestly, which as of now means Gregory Whitmore is suspended pending investigation into financial misconduct. Effective immediately, the board exchanged nervous glances. Richard cleared his throat again. You can't just I can, I said, pulling out another document. For the bylaws of Whitmore Systems, any shareholder holding more than 10% of the company's intellectual property rights can call for an emergency board vote in the event of compromised leadership. Richard looked at the document, then at Greg, then at me. He's right, Greg's face turned crimson. You can't be serious. You're taking the word of him. Yes, Richard said, because he's the only one keeping us from bankruptcy right now. Gregory's lips parted like he wanted to argue, but all that came out was a choked laugh. You planned this? Of course I did, I said, closing the folder. You raised me in this shark tank and forgot I had teeth, too. Tracy, bless her nervous little heart, tried to regain order. Well, let's proceed with the formal vote. The vote took all of 10 minutes. 5 in favor of suspension, 1 abstaining, and Greg voting against himself. That part was awkward, but deeply satisfying. When it was done, Greg slumped back in his chair, staring at the table like it had personally betrayed him. You think you've won, Evan? He said quietly. You think this makes you powerful? I stood, gathering my documents. No, Greg. It makes me free. As I reached the door, he called after me. If you walk out that door, you'll regret it. I turned, met his glare, and smiled. I already did. That's why I'm not staying. I pushed open the boardroom door, and for a split second, I swear the universe slowed down just to let the poetic weight of it sink in. I'd entered that room years ago as the son-in-law, the lucky hire, the background tech guy. I was leaving as the man who'd quietly outplayed an entire corporation using nothing but patience and code. But before I could leave entirely, Alyssa appeared in the hallway. Of course, she did because irony loves timing. She looked perfect as usual. Hairstyled, phone in hand. The face of someone who just lost the Wi-Fi password to her own life. What did you do? She demanded. Fixed a bug, I said simply. Her eyes narrowed. You ruined my father. I tilted my head. No, Alyssa. Your father ruined himself. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see it. She stepped closer, eyes gleaming with that mix of rage and entitlement I'd once mistaken for passion. You're not getting away with this. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. Funny thing, You said the same thing on our wedding day. She flinched just barely. You're a monster. No, I said, adjusting my jacket. I'm efficient. Then I walked away down the hallway, past the framed photos of Whitmore excellence. Past the trembling interns, past every reminder of the empire that once looked untouchable. I took the elevator alone, watching my reflection in the mirrored walls. Calm, composed, slightly smug. By the time I reached the lobby, word had spread. The staff's whispers followed me like a ripple. He took down Greg, the son-in-law. Did you hear? He owns the software. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Outside, the air was warm and alive. My phone buzzed. An email notification from the board. Offer of CEO position Whitmore Systems. I stared at it for a second, then laughed. The kind of deep honest laugh that comes from somewhere below the ribs. I typed my reply right there on the sidewalk. Appreciate the offer, but I'm allergic to hypocrisy. Try Ben from accounting. He's had management envy since 2019. Send. I slipped my phone into my pocket, loosened my tie, and kept walking. The city hummed around me, the sun breaking through clouds like some cosmic spotlight, saying, "Well done, kid." Revenge, I realized, doesn't need applause. It doesn't need fire or screaming. Sometimes it's just a quiet walk out of a building you once called hell. With your dignity intact, your enemies exposed, and the satisfaction of knowing you didn't just win. You rewrote the whole damn game. News travels fast when rich people fail. It's like oxygen for gossip blogs and blood for business news anchors. The morning after my little boardroom intervention, Whitmore Systems made the front page of every financial paper. Whitmore Systems under investigation for fraud and misconduct. The subheading was my favorite. Insiders claim whistleblower acted within rights as silent shareholder. Whistleblower. That's cute. They made it sound noble. It wasn't noble. It was personal. I sat in my apartment still in pajama pants watching the chaos unfold on live TV while eating cereal straight from the box. On screen, Gregory was doing that billionaire damage control thing, standing outside his mansion in a tailored suit, pretending to be calm while lawyers hovered like vultures. This is a temporary misunderstanding, he told reporters. The truth will come out. Yeah, Greg, it would. Unfortunately for you, I wrote it. By 10 a.m., Whitmore Systems stock had dropped 12%. By noon, it was trending on X, formerly Twitter, but still the same dumpster fire. The hashtags were merciless. Hashtag Witless Systems #Gregate and my personal favorite hashtag Father and Flaw. Someone even made a meme of Greg's face photoshopped onto the Titanic captioned unsinkable. Huh? I nearly choked on my cereal. Meanwhile, Alyssa's name started popping up, too. Her consulting firm became the internet's new obsession. Screenshots of the financial transfers leaked. Her influencer sponsors quietly pulled their deals. And one brand even posted a statement. We at Radiance Cosmetics do not condone unethical business practices. Translation: we loved you until you became bad PR. Alyssa's followers turned on her with lightning speed. The same people who used to comment Queen Energy nail polish on her posts were now writing, "Guess karma doesn't come with a filter." She went from posting outfit of the day videos to posting nothing at all. Radio silence, which for her was basically an obituary. By mid-afternoon, I got a call from Marcus. Dude, you seeing this? They're imploding. I turned down the TV volume. I see it. They just announced Greg stepping down temporarily. And bro, Alyssa deleted her Instagram. Now that's serious, I said. The world might actually spin off its axis. He laughed. You're a menace, man. Correction, I said, leaning back on the couch. I'm retired, but retired didn't mean disconnected. I still had access to their internal systems, which I checked out of habit. Their servers were holding for now, but their internal communication threads were pure chaos. Executives panicking. Investors threatening to pull funding. One email even read, "Does anyone know who owns the Nexaware IP?" Spoiler. Nope. The next day, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Evan, please tell them I didn't know. Alyssa. I stared at it for a good minute, thumb hovering over the reply button. Then I typed, "You didn't know much, apparently." And hovered again. My better self deleted it. Silence was heavier. Silence made people feel their mistakes in surround sound. Later that afternoon, I took a walk downtown. It was funny how the world kept moving while someone else's empire crumbled. People ordering coffee, walking dogs, honking at traffic lights, completely unaware that somewhere a man who once called me a charity hire was watching his empire burn. There's poetry in that kind of oblivion. As I passed a newsstand, a headline caught my eye. Tech titan's son-in-law exposes corruption inside the Whitmore scandal. There was a blurry photo of me leaving the boardroom, mid-smirk. I laughed. Great, I muttered. Now I'm the hero no one asked for that night. I poured myself a drink, good whiskey this time, not the discount stuff, and toasted the quiet. The kind of peace you earn after walking through fire barefoot and somehow coming out with both shoes. I checked my email one more time before bed and saw something unexpected. A message from Clara Jensen. Clara was an old colleague from my early days at Whitmore. One of the few people who treated me like a human instead of Greg's charity project. The subject line read, "Couldn't resist." The email said, "Just wanted to say I saw what you did. You turned corporate betrayal into a TED Talk. Drink soon. You deserve something better than instant noodles and revenge." I smiled. Clara always had a way with words. The following week, the investigation went public. Turns out the Securities and Exchange Commission doesn't appreciate creative accounting. The Whitmore's private auditors found discrepancies. Translation: they got caught cooking the books. Greg's offshore assets were frozen faster than last year's turkey, and he was forced to step back indefinitely. Alyssa's mother, Melanie, the walking Botox sculpture, fled to Arizona for spiritual detox, which is rich considering that woman's soul has probably been on airplane mode since 1987. As for Alyssa, she tried rebranding. She posted one last video, teary-eyed, voice trembling, playing the victim like it was Broadway. "I didn't know what my father was doing," she said. "And I never wanted to hurt anyone." The comment section was brutal. "Girl, you knew. You were cashing the checks. We prefer our influencers with ethics, not offshore accounts." Her video went viral for all the wrong reasons. Within days, her management dropped her and her name became a punchline on late-night shows. Jimmy Fallon even said, "If you think your family dinners are awkward, imagine being a Whitmore." Meanwhile, I started quietly rebuilding my life. Clara and I grabbed the drink she promised. A rooftop bar overlooking the city. She raised her glass. "To poetic justice," she said. "To poetic coding," I replied. She grinned. "You know, you could easily take over Whitmore Systems now." I shook my head. "Nah, I'm done babysitting billionaires. I'd rather build something new." And I did. Within a month, I poured a portion of my settlement money into something I called the Thomas Rivers Initiative, named after my late mother. It was a scholarship program for young programmers from low-income backgrounds. Kids who reminded me of myself before I learned to smile through boardroom humiliation. We launched with a small press release. Nothing flashy, but the applications flooded in. Turns out when you stop trying to impress the world that burned you, it starts looking at you differently. One afternoon while reviewing applications, I got another call from an unknown number again. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Evan, it was Alyssa." Her voice was raw, unfiltered. "Ah," I said, the internet's favorite cautionary tale. She ignored the jab. "I just wanted to say, I never thought you'd actually do it." "Do what?" "Stand up for myself." "I didn't mean it like that," she said quietly. Dad's destroyed. Mom's gone. And me? I can't even walk into a coffee shop without someone whispering. Sounds like karma's got good aim." Silence. Then she said, "Are you happy?" I hesitated. "Yeah, happier than I've been in a long time." "You're enjoying this?" she accused, voice cracking. "Not really," I said. "Enjoyment implies it was fun." This was necessary. She sniffed like she wanted to say something else, but instead she whispered, "Goodbye, Evan." "Goodbye, Alyssa." I hung up and sat there for a long time, staring out the window. The city lights blinked back like a Morse code message. I didn't need to decode. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't vindictive. I was just done. The world eventually moved on. The Whitmore scandal became old news, replaced by newer disasters and fresher memes. Greg's name still popped up occasionally in lawsuits, in think pieces about corporate accountability, and once in a charity gala brochure that hilariously listed him as former visionary. Alyssa resurfaced months later in a small town running a yoga studio called Renewal. I almost respected it almost. As for me, I kept building. Nexaware thrived, rebranded under my own name this time. No secrecy, no aliases. I even started mentoring young engineers, teaching them not just how to code, but how to read contracts, protect their ideas, and never let anyone treat them like disposable labor. One evening, Clara stopped by my office with takeout. "You ever think about forgiving them?" she asked between bites of noodles. I thought for a long second. "Forgiveness is overrated," I said. "Peace is better." She smiled. "You really turned your pain into profit," I laughed. "I call it emotional capitalism." Weeks later, I found myself back near the Whitmore building. The company had changed its name. Whitmore Systems was now Nexus Global because apparently slapping new on old sins makes investors feel better. I stood across the street watching employees come and go. Nobody recognized me. Good. I wasn't there to gloat. I was there to make sure the past really was behind me. The last time I'd walked out of that place, I was angry. This time, I just felt calm. There's something deeply satisfying about knowing you could destroy someone again, but choosing not to. That's real power. The kind that doesn't scream or demand attention. It just exists. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. An alert from one of the scholarship recipients. A kid named Malik had just landed an internship at a major cybersecurity firm. His message was simple. Mr. Rivers, thank you for believing in me. One day, I'll build something that changes everything. I smiled. Maybe he would. Maybe that's what all of this was for. Not revenge, not ego, but legacy. Because sometimes the fall of one empire is just the beginning of another. And this time, the foundation was clean. They say success is the best revenge, but I prefer to think of it as clarity with a payroll. When you've been through humiliation, betrayal, and a corporate soap opera that could win an Emmy. Rebuilding isn't just about bouncing back. It's about redesigning the entire blueprint. After the Whitmore fallout, I could have retired. I had more money than I'd ever need. A library of incriminating emails and front row seats to watch my enemies' Google reputations rot. But I wasn't interested in Nexaware relaunches under original founder Evan Rivers to provide next-gen cybersecurity with integrity. The word integrity wasn't just PR. It was a punchline aimed directly at Greg's ghost. 2 days later, my inbox exploded. Former Whitmore employees, good ones, the real brains, started reaching out. Hey, Evan, heard what happened. Any openings? It was poetic justice watching Greg's old talent crawl out from under his crumbling kingdom, looking for leadership that didn't come with a side of condescension. I hired 6 of them immediately. We weren't just a company. We were the Survivors Club. Then there was Clara. She officially joined as COO, though we both knew titles didn't matter between us. She'd been the one person who saw through my polite "I'm fine" routine during my Whitmore years. You're not fine, she used to say. You're just patient. Now, she'd help me turn patience into profit. Our first week was chaos disguised as progress. Coffee spills, code crashes, and an overenthusiastic intern who mistook my vintage keyboard for that old thing taking up space. But it felt alive, real, messy, human. Every ping of a new client inquiry felt like proof the universe wasn't punishing me. It was redirecting me. One morning, Clara walked into my office holding 2 coffees, and that mischievous grin she always wore when she had news. Guess who just called? She said. Please tell me it's not Greg, I replied. I'm out of popcorn, she laughed. Nope. Better. A Fortune 500 company wants to pilot our new security software. Said they saw your interview on CNBC. I blinked. Interview. She pulled up her phone. There I was on screen sitting in some studio looking calmer than a monk on sedatives. The segment was titled "The Man Who Outsmarted His Father-in-Law." I hadn't realized my quiet revenge had turned into a redemption arc. The anchor asked me what motivated my success, and my recorded self said underestimation. It's the most renewable energy source on the planet. I almost spit my coffee. Did I really say that? Clara smirked. You did, and it trended. The pilot deal went through. Suddenly, Nexaware wasn't just back. It was booming. We became the cybersecurity firm that companies actually trusted. Ironically, the Whitmore name still popped up, mostly in sentences like, "Please make sure we don't end up like them." That alone was worth another toast. Meanwhile, Gregory's life was unraveling faster than a cheap necktie. The federal audit had unearthed everything from shady vendor payments to falsified expense reports. Turns out borrowing against future revenue isn't just creative accounting. It's also illegal. His assets were frozen. His board voted him out permanently. And rumor had it he was now living in a smaller residence. Translation: the guest house of his former mansion. Alyssa, on the other hand, had gone quiet. Her yoga studio in Arizona was struggling, and every now and then she'd post vague motivational quotes like, "Growth hurts, but so does staying the same seedling." Duh. I scrolled past every time. Growth might hurt, but humility must have gone extinct in her zip code. Then came something unexpected, an invitation, not from Alyssa, thank God, but from the Chamber of Commerce. They wanted me to speak at a tech conference about ethical innovation. I nearly laughed out loud. A year ago, I was the guy fixing Wi-Fi for people who called me buddy. Now, I was a keynote speaker. Life really is a stand-up comedian. The conference was held in a swanky downtown hotel with chandeliers so bright they could cook breakfast. I walked onto that stage to polite applause, wearing the same calm smile that once unnerved Greg. My speech wasn't scripted. I just spoke from memory about the quiet power of being underestimated, about ethics not being a liability, and about how failure is just character development for the sequel. When it was over, I got a standing ovation. Some guy from a major tech magazine came up afterward and said, "That was brilliant. You're like the anti-Whitmore systems." I grinned. Best compliment I've had all week. That night, I got back to the office to find Clara waiting. She was sitting at my desk, feet propped up, reading an email on my screen. "You got another offer," she said. "Government contract, cyber defense initiative, big money." "Let me guess," I said, walking over. "They want us to fix something that shouldn't have been broken." She nodded. "Pretty much." I looked out the window, the city lights winking like they knew something I didn't. "You think we're ready for that kind of responsibility?" She smiled. "You were born ready. You just had to get rid of your in-laws first." We both laughed. It felt good, light, easy, not the forced laughter of company dinners or the brittle laughter I used to fake in front of Alyssa's friends. This was the sound of real beginnings. Months passed and Nexaware became more than a company. It became a culture. No politics, no nepotism, no hidden traps and contracts. I made sure of that. Every Friday, we held open forums where anyone could pitch ideas, even interns. And we had a rule: no one eats alone. Because I'd spent too many lunches alone in the Whitmore cafeteria listening to people whisper. Our success drew attention. Investors called, journalists emailed, and LinkedIn recruiters suddenly remembered I existed. But I wasn't chasing hype anymore. I'd learned that empires don't fall because of failure, they fall because of arrogance. And I'd had enough of that for several lifetimes. One evening, as I was locking up, Clara stopped me. "You know, you could have just walked away and lived quietly," she said. "Why build again?" I thought about it. Because rebuilding reminds me I didn't just survive them. I outgrew them. She nodded, then added softly, "I'm proud of you, Evan." And just like that, something shifted. The tension, the unspoken history, the quiet connection between us. It was all there humming in the air. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. Some things don't need words. Weeks later, Nexaware hosted its first scholarship dinner for the Thomas Rivers Initiative. Seeing those young programmers, their eyes bright, their dreams unbroken, was like watching a different version of myself. I gave a short speech, mostly improvised. When I started in tech, I thought power meant being in control. Now I know it means giving it away. The room went silent, then erupted into applause. Afterward, one student approached me, a shy kid named Malik. "Mr. Rivers," he said, "I read about what you did with Whitmore Systems. It's inspiring." I chuckled. "Kid, that's just a fancy way of saying I refuse to stay quiet." He smiled. "Well, I'm glad you didn't." Driving home that night, I realized something. Revenge might have started this story, but redemption was writing the ending. The anger was gone, replaced with a strange, calm gratitude. Every insult, every humiliation, every betrayal, it all led me here. I pulled into my apartment garage and sat in silence for a moment, listening to the hum of the engine die down. My phone buzzed, a notification from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I checked it. You were right. Silence does hurt more. No name, but I didn't need one. I stared at the message for a long time, then turned off my phone and smiled because finally I understood. The real rebuild wasn't the company or the money or the reputation. It was me. I wasn't the fired employee, the humiliated husband, or the lucky son-in-law anymore. I was Evan Rivers, founder, builder, survivor, and finally free man. And this time, I wasn't just rebuilding a life. I was designing a legacy. 2 weeks after the scholarship dinner, life had finally settled into something resembling peace. The kind of peace that doesn't need noise to prove it exists. The world had moved on from the Whitmore's implosion. And I had too, mostly. Sure, every now and then a headline would flash across my phone about the disgraced tech patriarch or former influencer Alyssa Whitmore attempting comeback, but I didn't click anymore. That chapter was closed, laminated, and filed under not my problem. Or so I thought, until one Tuesday afternoon, the past decided to call. Literally, I was in my office halfway through a code review and a bad sandwich when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something about the timing. 3:14 p.m., the universe's favorite hour for irony. Made me swipe. I didn't answer, though. I let it go to voicemail. Old habits die stylishly. A few minutes later, I saw the notification. One new voicemail. I hit play, not expecting much. Probably a spam call about my car's extended warranty. What I heard instead froze me mid-bite. "Evan, it's me, Alyssa." For a moment, I just stared at the phone like it had betrayed me. Her voice was softer, slower, missing that trademark smugness that used to fill every room she walked into. "I know you don't want to hear from me," she continued, her tone brittle around the edges. "You probably shouldn't. I just needed to say something. You never shouted, Evan. You never fought back. You just left. That silence, it's worse than anger. You were the real one, and I see that now." She paused, then audibly exhaling. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. I get it now. You didn't leave to hurt me. You left because you finally respected yourself more than I did." Click. End of message. For a solid 30 seconds, I sat there motionless. My sandwich had fallen apart on the desk. My coffee had gone cold. And the only thing moving was the replay button because, of course, I hit it again. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to hear if she meant it. Maybe I wanted to catch the faintest trace of regret hiding behind her words. Or maybe I just wanted to confirm that karma really had a voice. "You never shouted. You never fought back." That line hit harder than it should have. Because she was right. I hadn't. When everything collapsed, when her father fired me. When she handed me that brochure for homeless shelters. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just walked away. And silence, it turns out, echoes longer than screaming ever could. After the second replay, I laughed, not bitterly, just the kind of laugh that slips out when life circles back with perfect irony. The woman who once accused me of being too calm was now haunted by that calmness. Poetic doesn't even cover it. Clara poked her head into the office. "You good?" she asked, eyeing the untouched sandwich and the expression on my face. "Define good?" I said, leaning back in my chair. She frowned. "You look like someone who just read an obituary for an axe." "Close." I said, "I just listened to one." She arched a brow. "Alyssa." "Yeah. She called you." Voicemail. No tears, no theatrics. Just a neatly packaged apology with guilt sprinkles on top. Clara stepped in, crossing her arms. "And how do you feel about that?" I shrugged. Somewhere between indifferent and oddly amused. Like watching a car you used to own finally get towed. She smirked. "That's disturbingly specific." "Yeah, well, closure is a weird thing. You wait for it for years, then it arrives uninvited during lunch hour." Clara studied me for a moment. "You're not going to respond, are you?" "No," I said. "I think silence deserves to finish what it started." She nodded slowly, approving. "Good. Because if you do, I'm confiscating your phone." "Understood, ma'am." She laughed, gave my shoulder a quick pat, and left me to my thoughts. I hit play one last time, not for her words, but for the closure buried between them. "You were the real one, Evan." That line lingered long after the message ended. I couldn't tell if she said it for me or for herself. Maybe both. That night, I didn't delete the voicemail. I just archived it like a relic, a digital tombstone for a version of me that used to need her validation. Then, because irony is my love language, I poured myself a drink, queued up a playlist titled Peace After Petty, and sat on my balcony, watching the city flicker below. The next morning, I got to the office early. Something about that voicemail had me wired in a strange productive way. I dove into work, tweaking a new Nexaware feature that used AI to predict cyber threats before they even hit. We called it the firewall that thinks ahead, kind of like me, really. Around noon, Clara popped her head in again. "You're in early. Did you finally find your purpose or did insomnia win again?" "Both," I said. "Apparently, heartbreak makes good caffeine." She laughed. "So, what's next for the great Evan Rivers? You've conquered your demons, rebuilt your empire, made half the tech world jealous, and got a voicemail apology. What's left?" I thought for a moment. "Peace. Maybe some quiet success. No drama, no revenge arcs, just building something that lasts." "Boring," she teased. "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Beautifully boring." That afternoon, a journalist called asking for a follow-up interview. I said no. The last thing I needed was to become a soundbite again. They wanted to frame my story as from fired son-in-law to tech titan. I wasn't interested in the mythology. The truth was simpler. I got tired of letting other people narrate my story, so I wrote my own. Later that week, while reviewing scholarship applications, I noticed one essay that stood out. It started with, "Sometimes the smartest thing you can say is nothing at all." I read it twice, smiling to myself. The student talked about learning restraint, about choosing silence over reaction, and about how quiet strength often gets mistaken for weakness. I could have sworn fate was trolling me. I approved that application instantly. Life went on. The Whitmore name faded from the headlines, replaced by newer scandals. Greg was reportedly negotiating plea deals. Alyssa's yoga studio closed after 6 months. Her final Instagram post said, "Starting over again, this time for me." I didn't like it, but I didn't sneer either. Maybe she finally got it. Maybe not. Either way, I had work to do. One Friday evening, Clara and I closed up the office early and went for dinner. We ended up at a small Italian place where the lights were dim, the bread was free, and the wine didn't taste like disappointment. "You seem lighter," she said, swirling her glass. "Yeah, I admit it. It's weird. I thought I'd feel nothing after hearing that voicemail, but it feels peaceful, like finishing a book you hated, but still reading the last chapter." She smiled. Closure doesn't always come gift-wrapped. Sometimes it just shows up uninvited with bad timing. "Exactly," I said. "But I think I'm finally over it." "Good," she said. "Because you deserve someone who texts, not someone who leaves voicemails." I laughed. "You volunteering for the position?" She smirked. "Maybe, but only if there's health insurance." We clinkied glasses, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel haunted by the past. I didn't see Alyssa's face in every memory or hear Greg's voice in every doubt. It was just the present, messy, imperfect, and real. When I got home that night, I scrolled through my phone and hovered over the archived voicemail one last time. Then I pressed delete, not out of anger, not to make a statement, just because I didn't need it anymore. It had served its purpose. The silence had spoken louder than her apology ever could. I stood by the window, watching the city stretch beneath me. Somewhere out there, people were still chasing the validation I'd finally stopped needing. That's the thing about betrayal. It breaks you. But if you're lucky, it rebuilds you better. I whispered to myself, "You were the real one, Evan." And for the first time, I didn't need anyone else to say it. The next morning, I woke up early, grabbed coffee, and headed to the office. The sun was rising, casting gold over the skyline. And for once, it didn't feel like another day to fight. It felt like another day to live. The voicemail was gone, the ghosts were quiet, and my future had never been louder. Because sometimes the best apologies aren't heard. They're outgrown. There's a kind of revenge people expect. The cinematic kind, fire, shouting, lawsuits, headlines, maybe a dramatic, "I told you so" with thunder clapping behind you for effect. That's not the kind I went for. Mine was quieter, cleaner. The kind that doesn't need an audience because the victory plays out naturally, one consequence at a time, like dominoes politely collapsing in your favor. I used to think closure meant confrontation, but now I know it's peace with a side of profit. By the time fall rolled around, life had found a rhythm. Nexaware was expanding faster than I expected. We'd outgrown our first office and moved into a sleek downtown building with frosted glass doors and a panoramic view that screamed Executive Redemption, Arkansas. The same city skyline that once looked like a battlefield now looked like a playground. Every morning I'd walk in, greet the team, grab coffee, and sit down in an office that still smelled like new paint and second chances. Clara, my partner in chaos and reason, was now officially COO. The staff adored her because she had that rare mix of competence and empathy that made people want to follow her into a storm. Together, we turned Nexaware into something Greg's empire could never be. Ethical, transparent, and actually functional. The irony, half our clients were companies fleeing the fallout of Whitmore Systems' collapse. It's almost poetic when your enemies fund your comeback. Speaking of Greg, word around the industry was that he'd settled his charges. He wasn't in prison, but he wasn't free either. His temporary leave from Whitmore Systems had quietly become permanent exile. The board voted him out and the company rebranded under new leadership. They even changed their name from Whitmore Systems to Wykant. I nearly choked when I saw the new slogan, "Integrity in every line of code." Oh, the irony. The company built on theft and arrogance now selling integrity like it came in a 12-pack. But the funniest part, they still used our software. My software under license. Every renewal payment that hit our account felt like a quiet blow from the people who once thought I was disposable. As for Alyssa, she became a ghost. Word was she'd left Arizona after her yoga studio failed and was living somewhere up north teaching online classes about self-awareness through adversity. I didn't follow her updates, but occasionally someone would send me screenshots. Her captions were unintentionally comedic. "Growth is painful, but so is staying small. Girl, you married a Whitmore. Small was never your issue." I didn't respond or comment. The old me might have wanted the last word, but silence had become my sharpest weapon. One crisp Friday morning, I arrived at the office early. Habit, not ambition. The city below was waking up. Car horns, early commuters, the faint hiss of espresso machines. I poured myself coffee, leaned on the balcony railing, and watched it all unfold. That's when Marcus called. "Morning, CEO," he said in that smug tone he reserved for people he knew had made it out alive. "Morning, unemployed friend." I shot back. He laughed. "Hey, I'm freelancing." Big difference. Anyway, just wanted to say I saw the Whitmore stock update down another 12%. Guess people aren't buying Integrity 2.0. I smiled. "You calling to brag on my behalf?" "Pretty much," he said. "It's wild, man. Remember when you were sitting on my couch, jobless, eating leftover pizza, saying you'd figure something out?" "Yeah," I said, chuckling. "Turns out revenge pairs nicely with entrepreneurship." He paused, then asked, "You ever think about reaching out to Alyssa? Like just to say whatever?" "No," I said immediately. She had her say, I had my silence. "We're even." "Damn," he said. "You're colder than my landlord." "Not cold," I said. "Just healed." He exhaled. "Man, that's deep. You're like the Buddha of payback." "Put that on my business card," I joked, ending the call. Later that morning, Clara walked in with her usual 2 coffees. "You look smug," she said, handing me one. "What's the occasion?" "I was just thinking about how far we've come," I said. "You know, from unemployment and betrayal to running a multi-million-dollar company. It's weird how fast tables turn when you stop begging for a seat." She grinned. "You didn't just turn the table. You built your own and sold the blueprints." We clinkied our coffee cups like it was champagne. At noon, I had a meeting with the government cybersecurity division. They wanted to license Nexaware's AI-driven threat detection system. Big contract, big validation. During the pitch, the lead officer said, "Mr. Rivers, your reputation for integrity precedes you." I almost laughed out loud. Integrity, the very word Greg used to weaponize against me. The irony was rich enough to retire on. That deal closed by the end of the week, bringing in more revenue than my last 3 years at Whitmore combined. The universe, it seemed, paid on delay, but with interest. That weekend, Clara and I attended a networking gala. Our first as equals, not underlings. The ballroom was packed with tech elites, venture capitalists, and wannabe disruptors wearing $800 sneakers. At one point, a familiar face approached. Richard, one of the Whitmore board members who had voted to suspend Greg. He looked like a man who now regretted voting late. "Evan," he said, shaking my hand. "Good to see you thriving. You really did rebuild from the ashes." "Yeah," I said with a polite smile. "Turns out. Ash makes good fertilizer," he chuckled awkwardly. "You know, I never realized how much of Whitmore's success depended on your work," Greg always said. "Yeah," I interrupted. Greg said a lot of things. None of them aged well. Richard coughed into his drink and wisely changed the topic. Later that night, as the gala wound down, I stepped outside for air. The city skyline shimmered under the soft glow of street lights. I could still hear faint music from the ballroom, a jazz band playing something slow, thoughtful. Clara joined me, arms crossed against the cool air. "Nice speech," she said. "Thanks," I replied. Though I'm pretty sure half that crowd only applauded because I mentioned AI. She smiled. "Still, you were good. Calm, confident, humble." I raised an eyebrow. "Humble? Let's not stretch it." She laughed, bumping her shoulder against mine. "Fine. Calm, confident, semi-humble." I looked at her, then really looked. For the first time in years, I wasn't pretending to be okay. I was. The pain, the bitterness, even the sarcasm, they'd become fuel, not chains. "You know," I said, "I used to think revenge had to be loud. That the only way to win was to make sure everyone saw it. But this," I gestured to the skyline, "to the life we'd built. This feels better." Clara nodded. "Because this isn't revenge, it's evolution." That line stuck with me long after the night ended. Evolution. Maybe that's what all of this had been. Shedding versions of myself that no longer fit. A few weeks later, I got an unexpected email from a familiar address. gregory.whitmore@wisintentech.com. The subject line read, "You won." I hesitated before opening it. Inside, there was only one line. "I underestimated you. You deserved better." No signature, no excuses, just that. For a second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered the smirk he wore the day he slid that termination letter across the table and said, "Performance issues." I hit archive. Not delete, Archive. Let him live forever in my inbox, just far enough from relevance. Months passed and life kept getting better. Nexaware expanded internationally. The Thomas Rivers Initiative tripled in size, sponsoring coding camps for kids who didn't even own laptops. And every time a news story popped up about Whitmore Systems' ongoing restructuring, I just smiled and turned the page. One quiet evening, I sat on my balcony again. Same city view, same soft hum of traffic. Clara had left after a long day of meetings, and I was alone with my thoughts. I poured a drink, leaned back, and let the silence wrap around me like an old friend. That's when my phone buzzed. A notification from Nexaware's accounting app. Another payment from Wycantech. License renewal complete. I laughed out loud. Every few months they still paid for access to the very system Greg once called overcomplicated nonsense. I raised my glass toward the skyline. Cheers, Greg. Thanks for keeping the lights on. The night air was cool, the city alive, and for the first time, I felt something better than victory. I felt balance. Revenge had done its job. It got me through the storm, but peace built the house afterward. Because here's the truth. They don't tell you about revenge. The loud kind burns out fast. It's fireworks. Brilliant but brief. But the quiet kind, the kind that builds, grows, and pays dividends. That's forever. So when people ask how I got over it, how I went from fired son-in-law to founder, from humiliated husband to headline success, I tell them the same thing every time. I didn't shout, I built. And silence, my friend, pays dividends. Then I finish my drink, close my laptop, and smile at the thought of Gregory somewhere out there seeing my name on his company's monthly expense report. That's not just revenge. That's poetic accounting.